Chapter 50-88. But for the current Lin Yi, just adjusting his thoughts was useless, because he only had a little bit of star ink charcoal's consciousness left, and there was no place to replenish it. It was like training with one's body, but there was no energy in the world. How was he supposed to train? Fortunately, he learned about the divine knowledge grass from Duanmuyu in time. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a timely help. Lin Yi looked at her and asked, "Do many people know about the divine knowledge grass?" "It's very rare, because the divine sense grass is a secret that has been passed down from my master. Even the ancient books related to this ancient trial ground don't have any records of it. Besides me, I'm afraid none of the other trial disciples know about it." Duanmuyu suddenly paused and said thoughtfully, "Now that you know about it, suddenly asking this, is it because you have some kind of crooked idea?" "What crooked idea?" Lin Yi froze for a moment, then reacted and laughed. "Do you think I'm that kind of person?" Duanmuyu smiled. Of course, she knew that Lin Yi was not such a person. Otherwise, she would not have taken the initiative to say it. "So, only you and I know about the existence of the divine knowledge grass. Why are you telling me such an important thing?" Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder. In the face of a rare heavenly material like the divine knowledge grass, it was normal for cultivators to fight to the death, and his relationship with Duanmuyu was far from inseparable. What was this woman thinking? No reason, just a whim. Duanmuyu's face showed a rare playfulness.
Ah.
Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame. He didn't know that this woman had such a playful side in addition to being a tomboy. Women were really fickle creatures. To be precise, it should be considered as returning a plum for a peach. "I think you're a pretty good partner. You're trustworthy and trustworthy. At the very least, you won't have evil thoughts and kill me to seize my treasure." Duanmuyu explained with a serious expression. This was not just a whim, but a decision made after careful consideration. There were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in this ancient trial ground. There was the water lotus protector, the brain-eating insect envoy, and the ancient giant lizard. Each of them was an existence that was almost undefeatable. More importantly, there was a lord that was above them. Just thinking about it made one tremble in fear. Moreover, the divine knowledge grass was an extremely rare and precious heavenly treasure. Who knew what kind of terrifying spirit beast they would encounter? Even if he used his toes to think about the dangers involved, it would not be easy to collect the divine sense grass. So Duanmuyu had to find a reliable partner in any case, and Lin Yi was an excellent ready-made candidate. There aren't many people who can kill you. Why not find someone weaker than you to work with? This way, you won't have anything to worry about. Lin Yi smiled. This was the truth. Although Duanmuyu was only at the Foundation establishment great perfection, her Yiling sect martial arts techniques were extremely mysterious. If she really wanted to escape, even Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, who were at the gold core perfection, might not necessarily be able to kill her, let alone others. Then it's better not to find one. Duanmuyu rolled her eyes at him. Even her own strength was enough to protect herself at most. If she really encountered a terrifying spirit beast, it would be difficult for her to even protect herself. If she found someone weaker than her, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? That's true. How about this? After we find the divine knowledge grass, we split it in half. Lin Yi suggested. No problem. Duanmuyu had no objection to this. Although she was the one who provided the information about the divine knowledge grass, she did not know its specific location after all. She didn't even know if it really existed. Moreover, if they really encountered trouble, it would definitely be Lin Yi who would take the lead, so it was not a loss for her to take half. In that case, let's hurry up. Lin Yi immediately took the lead and walked forward, muttering faintly in his heart. Just now, Xue Jianfeng also hurried in this direction. Although it was not strange that everyone's destination was the river of divine knowledge, he always felt that things were not so simple. The two of them were not far from the location of the river of divine knowledge. In addition, Lin Yi could also pull out the water lotus doppelganger to show the way. Compared to others who could only follow the map, they could walk a lot less in vain. After only half a day, Lin Yi and Duanmuyu arrived at the legendary river of divine knowledge. When they saw the scene in front of them, Both of them were shocked and could not say a word for a long time. In their previous expectations, since the river of divine knowledge was located in the deep mountains and dense forests, it would not be very big. At most, it would be an ordinary forest river, but they did not expect that it was not the case at all. The river of divine sense that was reflected in his eyes could only be described with a few words: magnificent and majestic. The surface of the river was shrouded in a faint layer of fog, and the other side could not be seen at a glance. Even Lin Yi's divine knowledge could not detect it. Even if the inexplicable fog interfered with the divine knowledge, it at least proved that the river of divine knowledge was more than several kilometers wide. No one has been here before. Lin Yi carefully looked around the coast and found no traces left by human cultivators. It could be seen that even if someone came to the river of divine knowledge, they would definitely not be in this area, but in another section of the river. But Duanmuyu paused and said doubtfully, "It is said that the river of divine knowledge can temper the divine knowledge, but I don't feel anything different about this river." In this primordial smelting trial, almost everyone had come for the river of knowledge. However, no one knew what mysteries the river of knowledge possessed or how to temper one's divine sense. Everything could only be figured out on the spot when they arrived. Maybe it's the effect of the river water? Lin Yi thought for a while and immediately dipped his hand in the river water. Not only did he carefully sniff it, but he also directly licked it with his tongue. This was a quite risky move. After all, no one knew what was wrong with the river of divine knowledge. What if the river water was poisonous? However, Lin Yi dared to try it rashly because he was a spirit body and had the holy water pearl in his hand. However, the result of the attempt made him speechless. This water was simply ordinary river water. There was nothing special about it. If he was an ordinary cultivator, it would not be surprising that he could not detect the mystery, but he was Lin Yi, and he was a spirit body that was most sensitive to divine knowledge energy. If this river water really had the effect of tempering the divine knowledge, how could he not feel it at all? Chapter 50-89. Lin Yi glanced at her and immediately took out a wooden bowl from the jade pendant space, scooped a bowl full of river water and handed it to her. "Warrior, drink this bowl of spiritual knowledge river water." Duanmuyu rolled her eyes, took the wooden bowl and took a sip, smacking her lips while frowning. "Except for the slight bitterness, this is just ordinary river water. It can be seen that the key is definitely not in the river." Lin Yi concluded. "Then where is the key?" Duanmuyu asked. "In the river." Lin Yi was very sure. If this river of spiritual knowledge was just an ordinary river, he would definitely not think so, but this river was not only extremely wide, but it was also shrouded in a layer of inexplicable fog. No matter how he looked at it, it was unusual. If there was nothing strange about it, Lin Yi would feel strange instead. "Do you want to go down and have a look?" Duanmuyu asked. Although the river could not be seen at a glance, the nearby river water was still very clear, and even the bottom of the river could be seen at a glance. If they just explored near the shore, even if they encountered danger, they could escape in time. There should not be any big problems. It's best not to do this unless it's a last resort. Lin Yi shook his head decisively. Although he couldn't say why, his intuition told him that this river was definitely not simple. If they rashly went down the river, they might encounter a terrible crisis. "But besides going down the river, what else can we do?" Duanmuyu said helplessly. "Let's not worry about the river of spiritual knowledge for now. Let's find the spiritual knowledge grass first." "Didn't you say it was near the river of spiritual knowledge?" Lin Yi suggested. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge could be put aside for now. It would not be too late to figure out what to do next. In contrast, the spiritual knowledge grass was more important. If they could find the spiritual knowledge grass, it did not matter much whether the river of spiritual knowledge could temper the spiritual knowledge. "Not nearby, but in the river," Duanmuyu said. "In the river?" Lin Yi was surprised when he heard this and could not help frowning. Is the so-called effect of the river of spiritual knowledge referring to the spiritual knowledge grass? "That's possible." Duanmuyu nodded. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge was only recorded in a very small number of ancient books, but there was no substantial conclusion that could be passed down. The so-called tempering of spiritual knowledge was only a very vague description. Maybe it was referring to the spiritual knowledge grass, but it was not clearly mentioned in the ancient books. So we really have to go down there? Lin-Yi couldn't help but have a headache. His intuition was rarely wrong. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really didn't want to go into the river. That's not necessarily the case. We can wait for the river to ebb, then we can go down the river to find the spiritual knowledge grass, as long as we come up in time before the tide rises.
Duan Muyu said.
This was a method passed down by her master. Otherwise, it would not be so easy to find the divine sense grass growing in the river. All right. Lin Yi's eyes lit up. Such a wide and boundless river would definitely have high and low tides. Even if it was still risky to wait until the tide was low, it was much less risky than entering the river rashly. This method was feasible. After the two agreed on the plan, they meditated and rested by the river, while conserving their energy and waiting for the tide to ebb. Not long after, the river slowly receded, and the bottom of the river near the shore was revealed to the two. Lin-Yi and Duan Muyu got up at the same time, glanced at each other, and went down the river to look for the divine sense grass. However, although the tide was ebbing, the river was not completely drained. Only a small part of the riverbed was exposed. Lin-Yi and Duan Muyu could only hurry up and search this part of the riverbed. When the tide rose, they would have to hurry back to the shore and wait for the next ebb. What the two did not expect was that the bottom of the river of spiritual knowledge was unexpectedly green, with all kinds of water plants everywhere. It was not easy to find the divine sense grass that they had never seen before. Even if Duan Muyu knew some of its general characteristics, it would not be easy. Let's take our time. There is no limit to the number of times we can search. This time we will first search a section, and next time we will search another section. If there really is a divine sense grass, I believe we will find something. Lin-Yi said. And then let's start from the deepest riverbed and wait for the tide to rise before we go to the shore. This way, we will have a little more time.
Duan Muyu suggested.
Okay. Lin-Yi nodded. The two immediately began to search the riverbed closest to the center of the river. This place was 3 or 4 miles from the shore, but even so, with Lin-Yi's divine sense, he could not detect how wide the river was at the moment, let alone the boundary of the other side. This river of spiritual knowledge was really a bit wide. People who did not know might think it was a sea. This mud is a bit deep. Lin-Yi frowned when he walked halfway. At this time, the mud had already reached his thigh. According to this, when they reached the farthest end, the mud would at least reach his chest. If it was an ordinary person, it would be extremely difficult to even move a step, let alone find the divine sense grass in this environment. Even if they waited until the tide rose, they would not be able to retreat, and even their lives would be lost in the river. However, this was only for ordinary people. For a master of the foundation establishment stage, it was nothing. At most, there would be some hindrance in their movements.
Lin-Yi was still a soul body.
Although all the parts in his body were still there, his weight was much lighter than his body. As long as he controlled it a little, even if he stood on the mud, he would not sink. Of course, Lin-Yi actually had a more convenient method, which was to transform into a soul body. However, he always felt that this place gave him an inexplicable sense of crisis. If something happened to his soul body, he might not even have a chance to react, so he did not dare to do this rashly. On the other hand, Duan Muyu was also calm, walking on the mud, as if she was walking on flat ground. She looked more elegant and neat than Lin-Yi, and she was also silent. Seeing Lin-Yi looking at her in surprise, she smiled and explained, Silent Leaf Fall is a specialized light body martial technique of our Yiling sect. Very good. Lin-Yi sincerely praised. This was not a compliment. With his insight, he could see the value of Silent Leaf Fall. Using it to deal with the mud was really overkill. This kind of silent light body martial technique could only show its greatest value in actual combat. As the eldest senior sister of Yiling sect, Duan Muyu was indeed not simple. Duan Muyu smiled slightly and then began to carefully search for the divine sense grass in the omnipresent pile of water plants. Lin Yi also did not neglect. This place was not suitable to stay for long, and they had to move quickly. The two of them were very efficient, but even so, they still found nothing. When the tide rose, they returned to the shore empty-handed and looked at each other. Chapter 50-90. Well, it's getting dark now. Let's conserve our energy and wait for the tide to ebb tomorrow morning before going to the next riverbed to look for it. Lin Yi nodded. Although they had gained nothing today, at least there was no unexpected danger. It could be seen that the idea of going down the river to look for it when the tide ebbs should be right. It was nothing more than whether they could find the divine knowledge grass in the end. This matter not only depended on effort, but also depended on luck. All the two of them could do was do their best. For safety reasons, the two did not stay on the shore for the night. Instead, they found a nearby big tree and made a medium-sized tree hole with their bare hands so that they could rest in the hole with peace of mind. Lin Yi also deliberately summoned the water lily doppelganger to inquire about the whereabouts of Cold and the others. After confirming that everyone was not in danger for the time being and that they were all resting in a place not far from the river of divine knowledge, he was relieved. The night was quiet and there was no one around. A man and a woman alone in a tree hole. Most women would feel uncomfortable, but Duan Muyu did not have such concerns at all. While resting, she was also carefully looking at Lin Yi. "Why are you looking at me?" Lin Yi could not help but stop in surprise. Are you practicing withered leaf rejuvenation?" Duan Muyu asked with a strange expression. Her perception was far more sensitive than ordinary people, and the chi fluctuations on Lin Yi's body just now were too familiar to her. Although she only said a little bit of the essence and did not reveal any cultivation method, it was reasonable to say that there should be no way to practice it, but the problem was that the other party was Lin Yi. Since this guy could even imitate the unique skill of the evil cultivator, the soul hook hand, let alone withered leaf rejuvenation? Can't I? Lin Yi looked at her and said, "I don't care. Anyway, even if you really practice it, it's your own exploration." Duan Muyu shrugged. Although it was a little irresponsible to turn a blind eye, it was their business how they wanted to explore and research, and she really couldn't control it. "Don't worry. Actually, I'm not really going to cultivate your leaf spirit sex spring rejuvenation. If I'm not wrong, your leaf spirit sex techniques complement each other. I'll have to cultivate them from the beginning. It's impossible for me to cultivate spring rejuvenation on my own, right?" Lin Yi speculated. "You can even guess that? You're really a freak." Duan Muyu could not help saying in surprise. Just as Lin Yi had said, the essence of all of leaf spirit sex techniques was a progressive progression, from shallow to deep. It was a very complete system. If one didn't grasp the essence of the basic techniques, no matter how talented they were, they wouldn't be able to cultivate an advanced technique like rejuvenation withered leaves. Of course, if one could even grasp the essence of rejuvenation withered leaves, then grasping the essence of the basic techniques would be a matter of course. They wouldn't need to cultivate it specifically. "You flatter me." Lin Yi chuckled. In fact, he was able to speculate this not just because he had extraordinary insight, but mainly because his real body's level was high enough and his horizons were broad enough. He had seen all kinds of mental cultivation methods and martial arts techniques, so his judgment was naturally accurate. "If you're not going to cultivate spring rejuvenation withered leaves, then what are you doing?" Duan Muyu could not help asking. "I vaguely feel that the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves is very useful to me, but I don't know how to use it specifically. I need to explore and study it carefully," Lin Yi said honestly. To put it bluntly, the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves was to forcibly awaken hidden vitality. To a certain extent, it was somewhat similar to the super physical skills and ultimate physical skills that he had previously mastered. However, there were also major differences. After all, the latter purely stimulated the physical body, allowing it to have a stronger reaction speed. It was impossible for it to be like spring rejuvenation withered leaves that could restore the vital chi in the body, let alone have the miraculous effect of self-healing. Comparing the two, it was obvious that spring rejuvenation withered leaves was much more exquisite. However, whether it was restoring vital qi or self-healing, these two miraculous effects of spring rejuvenation withered leaves were of little value to Lin Yi. This was because not only did he know them, but he also had no sequelae. If he used spring rejuvenation withered leaves, he would definitely be in a weak state for a long period of time. That would be really fucked up. Lin Yi would not do something so stupid as to give up what was close at hand and seek what was far away. Of course, although it was of little value, Lin Yi still tried to figure it out. He wanted to master the trick and draw inferences. He did not need vital qi or healing, but if similar effects could be transferred to the primordial spirit, then it would be worth it. Don't forget that he was now a primordial spirit body. Duan Muyu silently looked at Lin Yi's various explorations and deductions. The profound mystery revealed from time to time really opened her eyes. This kind of feeling could be said to be unprecedented. Even her master had never made her unable to see through it. One had to know that her master was not an ordinary master of the gold core stage, but a real Yuanying stage old monster, standing at the top of the entire ancient small underworld. It was a pity that the top of the ancient small underworld was just like that. It was completely incomparable to the Heaven Stage Island. How could a mere Yuanying stage old monster be compared with a freak like Lin Yi who could even kill the giants of the mountain opening period? The two of them sat silently like this for a long time. Suddenly, Duan Muyu opened her eyes. She felt that Lin Yi's aura had inexplicably soared a lot in a moment, but now that she looked at it, there was nothing strange about Lin Yi's body, and there was no difference from just now. She couldn't help muttering, "Is it my illusion?" Lin Yi did not pay attention to her. It seemed that he was still immersed in his own exploration and deduction, and was unaware of the outside world. Duan Muyu even believed that, even if she stabbed him at this time, Lin Yi would not have the slightest reaction. Is this guy really insensitive, or is he too confident in me? Duan Muyu couldn't help but shake her head speechlessly. While continuing to meditate and rest, she carefully watched the movements outside. Since Lin Yi did not care about the outside world, this kind of thing could only be borne by her. What Duan Muyu didn't expect was that Lin Yi's sitting time was much longer than she expected. Huh? The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Lin Yi finally opened his eyes slowly, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but then he returned to normal. The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Big brother, it has already ebbed 5 times. Duan Muyu said angrily. What? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. He clearly just groped and deduced in his mind. It didn't take much time. Chapter 50-91. Moreover, she did not dare to go down the river alone to find the divine sense grass. The key was Lin Yi's current state. Duan Muyu did not feel at ease leaving him alone, so she could only stay and accompany him patiently. In this kind of situation, anyone would be angry. 3 days? Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame and quickly apologized with a smile. I'm sorry. I accidentally fell into a trance. Forget it, there is no time limit for this matter anyway. I'll just take it as a rest. Duan Muyu waved her hand generously, and then said with a bit of envy in her tone, But you are really amazing. You can casually enter a state of emptiness in this kind of place. Your perception must be amazing. It's really enviable. After emptiness was an epiphany, and this state was a rare opportunity for every cultivator. Apart from a very small number of people, most people would only be able to enter a state of emptiness a few times in their lifetime. Even Duan Muyu had only experienced it once. It was during that moment of emptiness and epiphany that she was reborn, and she became the eldest senior sister who was the pillar of the entire Yiling sect in one go. In a place where danger lurked everywhere, Lin Yi was able to enter a state of emptiness so effortlessly.
What was there to say about that?
It's just a coincidence, Lin Yi said modestly, but his whole temperament was obviously much more brilliant than before. It could be seen that he must have gained something, and the harvest should not be small. If even a freak like you is so modest, how can we mortals live? Duan Muyu curled her lips and looked at the sky outside. According to the experience of the past 2 days, the tide should begin to ebb soon. Okay, then let's hurry up. Lin Yi nodded. Because of that sudden enlightenment, they had already missed 3 days of time. Neither of them wanted to waste any more time and immediately rushed towards the River of Consciousness. Duanmuyu had already scouted the place 2 days ago and had planned out the riverbed they would explore every day. Lin Yi only needed to follow her. After their first experience, the two of them were much more familiar with the path this time around. They had more or less learned about how to identify the aquatic plants, so their efficiency was clearly much higher. Last time, when the tide rose, the two of them had only explored less than 5 kilometers of the riverbed. Now, there was still more than half the time before the tide rose, but the two of them had already explored 5 kilometers. Their progress was much faster than they had expected. When they found about 15 miles, Lin Yi suddenly stopped. In the dense pile of aquatic plants not far ahead, there was a plant that was completely different from the other aquatic plants. The whole body was dark black and had no leaves. It was just a slender and narrow branch. The surface of the branch was densely covered with thorns. Because it was covered by other aquatic plants and silt, it looked inconspicuous at first glance, but it exuded an inexplicable dangerous light. Something that could make a master like Lin Yi feel danger was definitely not an ordinary plant. Divine Knowledge Grass. Lin Yi suddenly rejoiced. The various characteristics of this plant were exactly the same as what Duanmuyu had described before. There was no doubt that this was the Divine Knowledge Grass. Really? Duanmuyu, who was not far away, heard Lin Yi's voice and quickly rushed over. Following the direction pointed by Lin Yi, she carefully observed the unique plant and then showed a look of ecstasy. Yes.
Yes.
This is the Divine Knowledge Grass. This is the Divine Knowledge Grass. Lin Yi himself wasn't completely sure at first, but since even Duanmuyu said so, then it was for sure. He said excitedly, "Let's hurry up and dig it out. It looks like the tide's about to rise."
And
Duanmuyu nodded heavily and quickly went up to carefully clean up the whole Divine Knowledge Grass. She found that its roots were deeply buried under the riverbed silt. No matter how hard she tried, she could not pull it out. She was a master of the foundation establishment great perfection. "You cut off the branches first. I will think of a way to get the roots," Lin Yi said when he saw this. If there was enough time, he could still think of a way. After all, a complete Divine Knowledge Grass was better than a Divine Knowledge Grass with broken roots. It was just that the high tide was imminent. No one knew what would happen after the high tide, so he could only act in a hurry. Okay. Duanmuyu did not hesitate. She immediately took out a simple knife and was about to cut off the Divine Knowledge Grass. However, at this moment, a strange-looking figure suddenly descended from the sky. An unparalleled airwave instantly sent the two of them flying. At the same time, it was accompanied by a familiar voice. "I finally found you."
Lin Yi.
Brain-eating insect. Lin Yi was shocked. It wasn't easy for him to find the spirit grass, and he didn't even have time to be happy about it. He didn't think that his old enemy would find it at the last moment. His luck was really too good. Duanmuyu was also shocked. The brain-eating insect was in existence at the same level as the water lotus protector. With her strength, she was not even qualified to be cannon fodder. How could she encounter this monster at this time? Duanmuyu looked at the Divine Knowledge Grass under the other party's feet. It was so easy to get, but she had missed it. She was really unwilling. Lin Yi was also extremely regretful. If he knew this would happen, he would not have avoided arousing suspicion. He should have put the Divine Knowledge Grass directly into the jade pendant space when he found it. When the time came, he could have taken it out and split it with Duanmuyu. That way, he would not have ended up in this situation. At this time, the Divine Knowledge Grass was being stepped on by the brain-eating insect. There was no chance to take it back. "I will find a way to stall it. You go first," Lin Yi said immediately. Now was not the time to worry about the Divine Knowledge Grass. If he missed the Divine Knowledge Grass, he could find it again, but if he lost his life here, then there would be nothing left.
But
Duanmuyu hesitated for a moment. Although she was a tough woman, she was not as open-minded as Lin Yi. She felt unwilling to leave like this, But in the face of the power of the brain-eating insect, she had no choice but to grit her teeth and nod. Duanmuyu immediately retreated to the river bank, but before she could take 2 steps, a dozen tangible and invisible wind blades had already roared towards her. This was the innate skill of the ancient Gomong clan. Duanmuyu was shocked. The power of any wind blade here could easily kill a golden core stage master, let alone a mere foundation establishment stage cultivator like her. Even Lin Yi did not dare to take such a strong attack head-on. If she wanted to save her life, she could only rely on herself. At the critical moment, Duanmuyu's figure suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving only a leaf that slowly fell down. The fall of a leaf signified the arrival of autumn. Lin Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Duanmuyu was also a genius. Otherwise, he could only watch the other party die, and he would really feel guilty. Chapter 5292. At this time, it was completely in combat mode. Its entire body had transformed into an extremely hideous shape. It had the wings of the primordial Gomong, the body of the red-scaled serpent, the steel claws of the 8-armed mountain king, the stinger of the venomous queen bee, and a terrifying head that was armed to the teeth with unknown characteristics of many powerful spirit beasts. It was an out-and-out killing machine. Lin Yi frowned as he looked at this guy. Although the brain-eating bug and the water lotus protector were at the same level, if he could choose, Lin Yi would definitely choose the water lotus protector. Even if he could not directly store it in the space of the jade pendant, Lin Yi would rather choose the water lotus protector. This was because the water lotus protector was skilled, and even if it was a nearly unsolvable and complicated technique like the moon's reflection, with Lin Yi's vision and insight, he would always be able to find flaws and find a way to deal with it. However, the brain-eating bug was different. This guy was clearly an existence that relied on its body to survive. It was not an exaggeration to say that its body was the strongest at the same level. If it was only at the level of foundation establishment great perfection, Lin Yi's methods would be enough to crush it head-on. However, the problem was that it was at least at the level of golden core great perfection. Facing Lin Yi, it had an absolute level of suppression. In this case, it had the most tenacious vitality and the strongest defense. It was simply invulnerable. Last time, Lin Yi used 2 vital energy bombs to deal with it, but in the end, he did not even hurt a single hair on it. This had already explained everything. With Lin Yi's current attack power, he could not even break through the brain-eating bug's defense. How could he fight it? Seeing Lin Yi's uncertain expression, the brain-eating bug suddenly laughed. Although it was a little interested in Duanmuyu, who used falling leaves to predict autumn, it obviously valued Lin Yi more. Its focus had always been on Lin Yi. This time, don't even think of escaping from my palm. I will never make the same mistake twice. Is that so? Are you sure you can catch up to me? Lin Yi revealed a playful look when he heard this. Facing the brain-eating insect, he had no confidence in other aspects, but he had absolute confidence in speed. After all, it was faster than his own body. Even if the brain-eating insect was strong, it couldn't be compared to a profound ascending stage master, right? There's no need for that. As long as I catch that woman just now, you won't escape. The brain-eating worm had learned its lesson this time, so it was obviously much more cunning. If it had held Cold and the others as hostages previously, Lin Yi would not have dared to escape at all. It was only because of its carelessness that Lin Yi managed to take advantage of the situation. It's clearly just an insect. I didn't expect it to be so good at judging people. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. We don't look at people with our eyes, but with our noses. Every one of you has a different smell. Different people have different smells. Human nature can be faked, but the smell in your bones cannot be faked. The brain-eating bug proudly showed off. Is that so? That's a good lesson. Lin Yi nodded and learned. This time he was really caught by the brain-eating bug. If he didn't have much contact with Duanmuyu before this, it wouldn't matter much. He could just turn a blind eye to it. But now, he couldn't ignore it. If Duanmuyu couldn't leave, he would definitely stay and fight to the end. You're welcome. Otherwise, you should be more tactful. Don't worry, It's rare to meet such a unique human master like you. I won't let you disappear for no reason. I will take you as my main body. From now on, you are me, and I am you. We are one. The brain-eating bug said excitedly. You and I are one? Lin-Yi listened with a strange face. If it really reached that step, it was uncertain who would swallow who. Even if the brain-eating bug had a powerful brain-eating talent, his Yuan Shun was not just a decoration. It was hard to say. How about it? If you take the initiative to cooperate, I can save you a lot of unnecessary pain. The brain-eating bug was still persuading him patiently. It was not that it was bored and wasting its breath, but it was afraid that it would accidentally damage Lin-Yi's brain when they fought. This kind of thing often happened. Once the brain was damaged, it couldn't eat the brain anymore. You can't really think that my brain is damaged, right? Lin-Yi looked at it like it was an idiot. It wanted him to surrender and let it swallow his brain. Only it could think of such a thing. Not satisfied? Then I will take a step back and leave a little bit of your consciousness for you to share a main body with me. That should be fine, right? The brain-eating bug continued to bargain. It could be seen that it was determined to get Lin-Yi's body. If it wasn't afraid of damaging Lin-Yi, it would have already slapped him with its claws. It wouldn't be so long-winded. Let me ask you a question. Since your current body is so powerful, at least 1,000 times stronger than mine, why do you still insist on using me as your main body? Lin-Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. In his opinion, the brain-eating bug was much more domineering than a human. Its entire body was full of killing weapons, and it would definitely have an advantage in a fight. If possible, he didn't even mind exchanging with the brain-eating bug. Of course, the main body had to be a human. He couldn't accept it if the main body turned into an insect. There's no harm in telling you. You humans may have weak bodies, but you are the spirit of all living things. No matter how powerful other species are, they're still limited by their racial talent. There is only one possibility. You humans may have a low starting point, but you have countless possibilities. If coupled with my brain-eating talent, you will be an invincible existence. Moreover, a high-level spirit beast will always need a human body to be on the stage. Otherwise, it will be laughed at by other spirit beasts, the brain-eating bug explained patiently. So that's how it is. Lin-Yi suddenly understood. No wonder this guy wanted to catch him, no matter what. It seemed like this guy's brain-eating talent was heaven-defying, but it also had a limit. There might be an upper limit to the species it could devour. Most spirit beasts only had one racial talent, and it was rare for them to have more than two. In this case, every time it devoured, it would only gain one more skill. However, humans were different. There were tens of thousands of cultivation methods and martial arts techniques. With the brain-eating bug's ability, it could even take all the cultivation methods and martial arts techniques as its own. Moreover, it didn't need to cultivate them from the beginning. Just the thought of it made people shudder. Chapter 52-93. Okay, the nonsense that should be said and should not be said has been said. You can also obediently accept your fate. The brain-eating insect suddenly laughed extremely sinisterly. Its eyes flashed red, and an invisible force field suddenly spread out from its body. Wherever it passed, the riverbed silt suddenly sank a lot, as if it was being crushed by something heavy. Lin-Yi also felt his body sink. Although it was not to the point where he could not bear it, with this inexplicable force field on his body, the speed and flexibility of his movement technique would be greatly affected. However, the brain-eating insect's target this time was obviously not Lin-Yi, but Duanmuyu, who had just used knowledge of autumn to hide. Sure enough, Duanmuyu, who did not reveal any flaws before, suddenly exposed herself. Although she did not directly reveal herself, two suddenly sinking footprints appeared in the silt, just next to the divine knowledge grass. There was no doubt that it was Duanmuyu. Lin-Yi could not help but be a little speechless. This woman was really brave. She knew the horror of the brain-eating insect, but she did not escape. She even dared to use knowledge of autumn to steal the divine knowledge grass. This courage was really unparalleled. Duanmuyu was about to take a knife to cut the divine knowledge grass at this time. After being caught off guard and revealing a flaw, she did not panic and still maintained the state of knowledge of Autumn's concealment. The brain-eating insect suddenly opened its mouth in the direction of the footprints, and an unparalleled strong suction force suddenly poured out. The result was unexpected. In addition to sucking in a mouthful of silt, there was no trace of Duanmuyu at all. "It's really interesting." The brain-eating insect laughed instead of being angry. If it were not for Lin Yi, a better choice, it even wanted to use Duanmuyu as its main body at this moment. In the face of its sudden force field, Duanmuyu did not panic and could calmly escape without even leaving a footprint. It must be known that this was a muddy land where one's feet would sink into the mud. The difficulty of this was extraordinary. Unfortunately, Duanmuyu did not manage to escape its grasp. The brain-eating bug's eyes flashed with red light again, and the invisible force field suddenly became several times stronger. Second layer pressure. Duanmuyu could no longer maintain her stealth state and immediately revealed herself. Before she could react further, the brain-eating insect had already landed right on top of her head. The venomous stinger pierced down at lightning speed. Duanmuyu had no time to react at all. At the critical moment, Linny appeared in front of Duanmuyu at the same time and pushed him away. However, he could not dodge in time, and his neck was pierced by the brain-eating insect's stinger from behind. It was a shocking scene.
Linny!
Duanmuyu's eyes immediately turned red with anxiety. Although her relationship with Linny was far from being on the same side, they were at least trustworthy friends. Moreover, she was a person who valued friendship. Now that she saw Linny dying for her, how could she not be anxious? I didn't expect him to be an infatuated person. But this is also good. It saves me a lot of trouble. The brain-eating bug was overjoyed when it saw this. It was most afraid that Lin Yi would escape again. If that happened, it did not know how much effort it would have to put in. It did not have such good patience. Just now, it pretended to deal with Duanmuyu to restrain Lin Yi. It did not expect Lin Yi to walk into its trap. This was really a pleasant surprise. Its stinger inherited the innate skill of the venomous queen bee. It was one of the world's few poisons, especially when it pierced through a vital point like the neck. Not to mention a mere human. Even with its vitality, it would not be able to survive such a fierce attack. As a result, Lin Yi's head, which was clearly hanging down, showed a strange smile. His figure flashed and suddenly jumped on the brain-eating bug's face. He then stuffed one hand into the other's mouth, leaving behind a true chi pill fire bomb that was compressed to the limit.
Boom.
The brain-eating bug's face was still full of shock. It had not even figured out how the other party broke free from its poisonous stinger, and the true chi pill fire bomb had already exploded in its mouth. Don't look at how the two true chi pill fire bombs last time could not hurt its hair. It only could not break the surface defense of its body. No matter how strong it was, its body should not be indestructible, right? The brain-eating bug was blown up on the spot. It immediately spat out black smoke and flew backward. It swayed for a long time and could not stand firm. Although it was unrealistic to kill it in a second, it must have been seriously injured. Are you okay? Duanmuyu looked at the intact Lin Yi and was stunned. His neck had obviously been pierced by the other party's stinger, so how could this guy be fine? I am a primordial spirit. What is the use of this kind of physical attack on me? Lin Yi grinned. At that moment, his neck had already been transformed into primordial spirit in advance. The other party's stinger did not even stab a single hair on him. He was just pretending to numb the other party. That's true. Duanmuyu could not help but choke. Because Lin Yi's primordial spirit was no different from ordinary people, even if they knew that he was a primordial spirit, everyone would unconsciously ignore this point. The brain-eating bug, who did not know the details, was even more likely to fall for it. While the two of them were talking, the brain-eating bug on the opposite side had already recovered. Its entire mouth was charred black from the explosion, making it look rather comical and pathetic, but the pressure it brought to the two of them did not weaken at all. Instead, it became even stronger. Lin Yi sighed in his heart. The brain-eating bug is a brain-eating bug. Last time, The red-scaled snake was killed on the spot by this attack, but now it is just a little embarrassed. It seems that it is far from the point of injury. It is really troublesome. Hoo. The brain-eating bug did not become angry. Instead, it calmly spat out 3 mouthfuls of black smoke. Then it stared at Lin Yi and said, "You can even ignore such a fatal attack. I really did not misjudge you. Who else can my main body but you? So, you really want to blackmail me?" Lin Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that after such a trick, the other party would become angry and give him an opportunity to take advantage of. Who would have thought that it would be such a reaction? Of course. The brain-eating bug laughed, and with a flap of its wings, it descended from the sky again. Its target was Lin Yi. Be careful and hide. Lin Yi took the time to tell Duanmuyu and immediately went to meet it head-on. Duanmuyu did not dare to neglect and quickly used silent falling leaves to hide to the side. At the same time, she was still holding a green leaf in her hand, ready to use falling leaves in autumn again at any time. She could not intervene in a battle of this level. It would be good enough if she could save her life and not drag Lin Yi down. Chapter 5294. Relying on its powerful body, the brain-eating insect was not afraid of any of Lin Yi's means. It did not hesitate to attack with its steel claw. Last time, it relied on this steel claw to explode the real Chi Pill fire bomb, and this time was no exception. However, Lin Yi obviously would not be stupid enough to really confront it head-on. With the strength of the opponent's body, not to mention his Yuan Shin body that was only at the Foundation establishment great perfection, even if he was at the profound ascension stage, he might not be able to gain the slightest advantage. If he really did so, he would only be courting death. Accompanied by a deep dragon roar, a wave of 5 elements killing intent that seemed to have materialized shot out of his hand, meeting the other party's steel claws first. The result was unsurprising. In an instant, the other party grabbed it, leaving not even dregs behind. It was a classic case of striking a rock with an egg. Is that all you have? The brain-eating insect sneered. In its opinion, this method was much weaker than the real Chi Pill firebomb just now. Although the real Chi Pill firebomb was simple and crude, its power could not be underestimated. If it was stuffed into its mouth, it could still cause some damage. As for this seemingly exquisite 5 elements murderous aura, it was nothing in front of it. Before it finished speaking, another 5 elements murderous aura had already attacked in front of it. The brain-eating insect suddenly became even more contemptuous. Once again, it lazily extended its steel claw and at the same time taunted, "This power is not even enough to tickle me. Even if you do it 1,000 times or 10,000 times, it will still be the same, a waste of energy." However, this time, above the 5 elements murderous aura, there was an additional layer of dense 8 trigrams patterns. Compared to the previous 5 elements murderous aura, it was many times more mysterious and profound. It was like a real 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon.
Puff.
Not only did the brain-eating insect's steel claw fail to tear it apart, but it was bitten by it. The entire steel claw was broken in an instant, and in an instant, blood splashed all over the sky. The brain-eating bug immediately howled in pain. Even though it had been careless, its combat instincts were not just for show. Before its brain could react, its venomous stinger had already stabbed back. However, before it could stab, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon had already let out another dragon roar and whipped it away with its tail. It crashed heavily into the mud below, unable to extricate itself. This scene happened too quickly. Not to mention the brain-eating bug that was stunned. Even Duanmuyu was dumbfounded by what he saw. It was clearly the same 5 elements murderous aura, but it couldn't even withstand a single blow just now. How did it become so powerful all of a sudden? What was even more shocking was where did Lin Yi go? Duanmuyu was confused, but the brain-eating bug was not stupid. It was caught off guard and suffered a big loss. Its brain worked very fast, and it looked at the 5 elements 8 trigrams flood dragon in the sky with great shock. "You're Lin Yi. The 5 elements 8 trigrams flood dragon did not speak, but it revealed an extremely human-like expression. Clearly, the brain-eating bug had guessed correctly.
It was Lin E.
How is this possible? Duan Muyu completely did not know what to say. She knew that Lin E was a primordial spirit, but primordial spirits were primordial spirits. As far as she knew, primordial spirits could only transform into the appearance of their original body. It was impossible to transform into other forms. She could not say that Lin Yi's original body was actually a flood dragon, right? Of course, Lin Yi was not a flood dragon. The reason why he could become what he was now was because of her Duan Muyu. Originally, with Lin Yi's current low realm of foundation establishment great perfection, it was far from enough to perform a big killing move like the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Until this time, when he had an epiphany, although his realm was still the same, his strength was very different because he had comprehended spring rejuvenation. Of course, what he comprehended was not the original version of spring rejuvenation. It was neither to restore vital energy nor heal oneself, but it was related to the primordial spirit. The human body had a self-protection mechanism, and the primordial spirit was the same. In theory, when it suffered a heavy enough injury, the primordial spirit would not directly collapse, but it would enter a self-dormant state like the body. That was to say, 70% of one's strength could be used at most, and the remaining 30% was used as a last resort for self-protection. There was a very strong valve between the two, and normally, even if one wanted to use it, one could not. Yiling Sek's spring rejuvenation could open the valve of the physical body after the physical body was injured, and then restore to the peak state in a short period of time. However, this state was similar to the final radiance of the setting sun, so there were great sequelae. Now, after 3 days of epiphany, Lin Yi had successfully found the valve that locked the primordial spirit. Once the valve was opened, the strength of the primordial spirit could directly skyrocket by more than 30%, or even more. Lin Yi's strength had already reached the limit of foundation establishment great perfection, and after it skyrocketed by 30%, he immediately became a gold core stage master. Even if it was only temporary, the extra strength was not fake. Of course, with such a huge gap in strength between him and the brain-eating insect, not to mention a temporary gold core, even a real gold core would be useless. At most, the power of the vital energy pillfire bomb would be stronger, but it would still have limited effect on the brain-eating insect. Needless to say, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was not included. In terms of level, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was far above the gold core stage. After all, this was a move that was invincible even in the nascent soul stage. It was just that Lin Yi's realm was too low, and at the same time, he encountered a freak like the brain-eating insect, so he seemed so powerless. However, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was different. Its level was much higher than the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Against the brain-eating insect, the level of the move was far more crushing than the actual strength of the brain-eating insect against Lin Yi. To put it bluntly, once the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was released, it was enough to completely reverse the difference in strength between the two. However, even if Lin Yi's strength had reached the temporary gold core stage, it was not enough to perform a profound martial skill like the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Therefore, he thought of a way. Relying on the convenience of his primordial spirit, he integrated his entire primordial spirit into it. In this way, not only did he successfully form the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura, but he also created a living 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon. You can actually transform into a dragon? Is this your real body? The brain-eating insect was completely shocked. Looking at the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon circling back and forth in the sky, it was full of fear. Looking at the entire spirit beast world, the dragon race had always been synonymous with being powerful and invincible. Even the flood dragon was the same. Although the brain-eating insect was gifted, it could not help but feel fear in the face of the dragon race. This was an instinct, a fear that came from the depths of its soul, and it could not be suppressed no matter how hard it tried. Why don't you guess? The 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon suddenly spoke, and it was Lin Yi's voice. Chapter 50-95. Hehe, this is a good name. Okay, this will be my flood dragon form. Lin Yi readily accepted the advice and no longer talked nonsense with this guy. He immediately flew down toward the brain-eating insect. It should be known that there was a time limit for him to maintain the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon form. He did not have to worry about the consumption of true qi, but the consumption of divine sense could not be made up. Therefore, he estimated that the time limit of a stick of incense was the limit. If he could not kill the brain-eating insect within this time, the consequences would be unimaginable. In fact, with Lin Yi's extremely pragmatic style, if it were not for the first time being in the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon form, and he was not too proficient in controlling it, he would not even give the opponent the time to talk nonsense. He would definitely beat it to death without saying a word. He would kill, injure, and cripple it. The rest could be dealt with later. Hehe, you want to play close combat with me? I am the ancestor of close combat. Do you really think I will be afraid of you? The brain-eating insect was so angry that it laughed. It was caught off guard and suffered a big loss, but if it was close combat, there was no better spirit beast in the world. It was now the ultimate killing weapon of various spirit beasts. Even if Lin Yi transformed into a flood dragon, what could he do? Before the voice died away, the snake body of the brain-eating insect surged. It originally only had 2 steel claws, and one was bitten off by Lin Yi. As a result, it forcibly grew 6 steel claws. At first glance, it almost looked like a centipede. Lin Yi ignored it. At this moment, he was in the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon. Even his own temperament seemed to be affected, and he seemed to be a lot more indifferent than usual. Previously, when he looked at the brain-eating insect, he felt that this guy was shocking and very difficult to deal with, but now that he had transformed into the flood dragon form, he clearly looked down on the brain-eating insect. It was a kind of indescribable contempt. It was like a high-level spirit beast facing a low-level spirit beast. No matter how the other party called out, it would not really take it to heart. The reason was that it was not qualified. Go to hell. The brain-eating bug was instantly infuriated. This kind of gaze that looked at its prey had always been exclusive to it. When had it ever been looked at like this by others? The brain-eating bug frantically waved its steel claws and pounced forward. At least on the surface, its powerful body did indeed give it the upper hand, but unfortunately, reality was extremely cruel. Whether it was its steel claws, tail stinger, or wings, it did not give it the slightest advantage. Instead, in less than a second, it was smashed down by Lin Yi with a sweep of its tail. Once again, it sank deep into the mud, unable to extricate itself. The brain-eating bug refused to give up. It was at a disadvantage before because it was caught off guard, and now it was at a disadvantage because it did not figure out the opponent's strategy. Again. As a result, this time, it suffered even more serious injuries. Not only did it break another steel claw, but even its highly dangerous poisonous stinger was broken. The poison on it had no effect on Lin Yi at all. It was purely a decoration. Crushing. It was a complete one-sided suppression. Duan Muyu was completely speechless as he looked at this crazy scene. The brain-eating bug refused to give up again and again, but in the end, it was tortured by the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon that Lin Yi had transformed into. In the end, 3.5 of its 8 steel claws were broken, and only the last one was on the verge of collapse. Its poisonous stinger was gone, and one of the wings on its back was broken. Its whole body was covered with scars and bruises. It was a miserable sight. Duan Muyu even began to pity the brain-eating bug. It was clearly a tyrannical and invincible existence, but in the end, it encountered Lin Yi, a heaven-defying existence that could not be measured by common sense. The torturer became the torturer. Did this guy not look at the almanac when he went out? The brain-eating bug indeed did not look at the almanac. In this ancient trial ground, it was originally an existence that was above tens of thousands of people. This kind of feeling of not looking at the almanac when going out would only appear on others but never on it. Today was really an accident. It was a tragic sight, but the brain-eating bug still refused to give up and struggled to fly up. Its vitality was extremely tenacious. It can fly with one wing? What a talent! Lin Yi could not help but give it a thumbs up, but he did not show the slightest mercy. With a gulp, he obliterated its only remaining steel claw along with its wing. The brain-eating bug once again fell into the quagmire. Previously, it was majestic and domineering, but this time, it had completely turned into a mudfish. A fallen phoenix was inferior to a chicken. Impossible! 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 The brain-eating bug was still struggling frantically in the mud, but both of its wings had been broken, and it could no longer fly. Close combat was the ability it was most proud of. Looking at the entire ancient trial ground, it could be called an invincible existence. After all, even the Lord did not use this method, but it did not expect to fall in the hands of Lin Yi today. Moreover, it was killed in the way that it was best at, in such a brutal melee. Is there a need to be so disappointed after losing to a dragon? Just how confident are you? Lin Yi could not help but be amused. That being said, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams dragon actually had such a powerful melee ability. This was something that even he did not expect.
He could not help but sigh.
The dragon clan was indeed an invincible existence in the spirit beast world. This racial talent was simply ruthless. Of course, being able to form such a one-sided crushing was not entirely because of the strength of the dragon. Another important reason was that this was not a pure physical body, but a semi-divine body that was formed by the fusion of primordial spirit and spiritual energy. Every claw and every bite seemed to be a simple physical attack, but the main body was the extremely profound killing intent of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams. In the face of the brain-eating bug's pure melee, it was naturally advantageous, so it was not surprising that it was crushed. My body is invincible. Even the Dragon Clan cannot be my opponent. Absolutely impossible. The brain-eating bug was still hypnotizing itself. Except for a few spirit beasts with a long lineage, the Dragon Clan was a mountain in the heart of every spirit beast. Most of them were only willing to bow down to them, but the brain-eating bug did not think so. Even if it could not surpass the Dragon Clan, it should at least be one of the very few, at least it thought so. However, today, Lin Yi used the bloody facts to shatter its fantasy. Even an illusionary dragon could crush it like this, let alone a real Dragon Clan. After all, the dragon was only a close relative of the Dragon Clan and the snake race. It was far from being a real dragon. Chapter 5296. The tide is rising. At this moment, Duan Muyu suddenly shouted from below. It was a pleasant surprise that Lin Yi could crush the brain-eating bug so easily, but she didn't forget about the important matter at hand. The tide had begun to rise, and they hadn't even had time to pick the spiritual grass yet. However, when she shouted, the first to react was not Lin Yi, but the brain-eating insect. Although it had been tortured into a miserable loach and seemed to be on the verge of collapse, the brain-eating insect still could not change its fierce and cunning nature. After hearing Duan Muyu's voice, it quickly drilled out of the mud. It really could not do anything to Lin Yi, who had transformed into a dragon, but it could easily capture Duan Muyu. As long as there was a hostage in its hands, it would not be defeated, and it still had the capital to bargain. Duan Muyu was shocked and quickly used the falling leaves of autumn to hide. However, before she had time to escape, the inexplicable aura that appeared before suddenly descended again, and the pressure was much stronger and more violent than before.
Trio.
Duan Muyu instantly revealed herself, and at this moment, the brain-eating insect was only one step away from her. Seeing that her body was about to be caught by the other party, it was too late for her to escape. At this moment, a dragon claw with the 8 trigrams pattern fell from the sky.
Puff.
The brain-eating insect was grabbed by the claw and then slammed into the mud. No matter how hard it struggled, it could not break free. Are you okay? Lin Yi glanced at Duan Muyu. To be precise, the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon glanced at Duan Muyu. No, I'm fine. Although she knew that the other party was Lin Yi, being stared at by a dragon at such a close distance, Duanmuyu subconsciously felt a little flustered. At the same time, she also felt a little excited. This experience was unprecedented. After all, it was a dragon, a legendary existence. It's good that you're okay. Before Lin Yi's voice fell, although the brain-eating insect's head was grabbed by him, the snake's body madly wrapped around him, and it was hysterical and powerful. After being whipped twice by it, even Lin Yi, who had transformed into a dragon, could not bear it. The 8 trigrams pattern on his body suddenly dimmed a lot and began to show signs of deviation and dissipation. Not good. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the time limit was up, and he couldn't maintain his dragon form any longer. He quickly gathered all his remaining qi into the dragon claw, and with a sudden burst, the hard skull of the brain-eating worm exploded like a watermelon, turning into a pile of thick, dirty water in the mud, and the stench of it assaulted his nose. At the same time, the flood dragon form of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flashed and disappeared. Lin Yi quickly returned to the appearance of a primordial spirit. His face was pale, and he was clearly a little weak. "How are you?" Duanmuyu quickly held him up. Although she did not know the specific situation, she could roughly guess that it was most likely related to the essence of rejuvenating dead leaves that she had revealed to Lin Yi before. The reason why Lin Yi suddenly transformed into a flood dragon was probably because of this essence. Even if it was not the same thing as rejuvenating dead trees, similar methods always had similar side effects. After using it, it was inevitable that he would be weak for a period of time. "I'm fine. With the holy water bead, it won't be a big deal." Lin Yi forced a smile. The side effect of rejuvenating dead leaves was a very long period of weakness. It could be as short as 3 months, or as long as a year and a half. Duanmuyu was able to recover so quickly. In addition to her own high talent, it was mainly because she did not use the complete version of rejuvenating dead leaves. What Lin Yi was using now was the mutated version of rejuvenating dead leaves. The side effects were not so troublesome, but still should not be underestimated. After all, the consumption was too great. Strictly speaking, because it was almost a one-sided crushing of the brain-eating worm just now, Lin Yi was not really injured. It was just pure consumption. However, the problem was that this consumption was not ordinary consumption, but the consumption after opening the last self-protection valve of the primordial spirit. This was serious. When Lin Yi's primordial spirit was overdrawn to this extent, it was not much better than being injured. Fortunately, the holy water bead could come in handy. Although this thing could not replenish his divine sense energy, it could at least stabilize his primordial spirit. Otherwise, at this moment, Lin Yi would not be able to retain his consciousness at all, and would have long laid down and entered a state of self-hibernation. While relying on the holy water bead to stabilize his primordial spirit, he absorbed the last remaining divine sense energy of the star ink charcoal. Lin Yi knew that he had to restore his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, a disaster would befall him if any accidents happened. Duanmuyu saw this and did not say anything else. She turned around and said to Lin Yi, "Get up. You're carrying me?" Lin Yi grinned and added subconsciously, "I'm a man." "Nonsense, I know you're a man. It's urgent, so what's wrong with carrying you? You've carried me before, so we're even," Duanmuyu urged. She did not take the barrier between men and women as seriously as ordinary girls. Otherwise, when she was carried by Lin Yi in her underwear, she would have been too ashamed to face anyone. How could she act with Lin Yi so openly now? Okay. Since even Duanmuyu did not mind, Lin Yi naturally did not care. Moreover, the tide had already risen, and he did not have the energy to move by himself for a while. This was the only choice he had. Lin Yi immediately climbed onto Duanmuyu's back. Although she was a tough woman, he could still smell a refreshing fragrance from her neck. Perhaps it was because she had been in contact with Yi all year round in Yiling's sect, but this fragrance was very different from that of ordinary women. Rather than saying it was a body fragrance, it was better to say that it was a kind of agarwood fragrance, which actually made him feel refreshed and refreshed. Behave yourself. Don't breathe into my neck. Duanmuyu frowned and spat. I didn't do it on purpose. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. He had overexerted himself, so it was natural for him to pant. How could he deliberately hold his breath at this time? Then don't breathe into my neck. Also, why are you so light? Duanmuyu muttered. She thought that a big man like Lin Yi would at least weigh more than 140 kilograms. She did not expect him to be so light on her back. If Lin Yi had not wrapped his arms around her neck, she was afraid that a gust of wind would blow Lin Yi away. I'm a spirit body, so of course I'm much lighter than you. Lin Yi smiled bitterly again. Normally, he would not be so light, but now he had consumed too much energy. It was already very difficult for him to maintain the appearance of his spirit body. How could he care about whether it was solid or not? Chapter 5297. However, before she leaned over to cut it, Lin Yi on her back suddenly said, Be careful.
What?
Duanmuyu was shocked, and then she saw a huge loach sweeping out from the mud pile. It was the brain-eating bug, whose head was just crushed by Lin Yi. This guy was still alive. A centipede dies but does not fall down, not to mention the brain-eating bug's heaven-defying vitality. Lin Yi even suspected that it had swallowed the brain of some earthworm-type spirit beast. Even if the head was gone, the remaining body could still survive and become a new independent individual. I underestimated the enemy. Lin Yi could not help but sigh. If he had dealt with the body just now, there would not be so many problems. Unfortunately, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams dragon form had reached its limit. If he had forcibly maintained it, he might have killed himself. He could only cancel it in advance, but he did not expect it to still leave a hidden danger. Unfortunately, it was too late to react now. Lin Yi's current state could not be said to be completely weak, but for a short period of time, he really did not have any strength to speak of. The only way to save his life was to transform into a spirit and leave it to fate. However, that was the last resort. Although the spirit form would not be harmed most of the time, once it encountered a method similar to alchemic fire that restrained the spirit, it would immediately be doomed. Lin Yi would not dare to do this even if he was in his peak state, let alone now that he was so weak that he could not withstand a single blow. Maybe he would not even need to be specifically targeted. A strong wind would directly destroy his spirit. After all, the brain-eating bug was a brain-eating bug. Although it had been abused beyond recognition, this near-death sneak attack was still very powerful. Even if it was not even half of its peak state, it was enough to deal with the average gold core stage master. At this moment, Lin Yi even vaguely heard the excited cry of the brain-eating bug. As long as its sneak attack was successful, it could counterattack and then activate its brain-eating talent. Unfortunately, it forgot one thing. Although Duanmuyu is just an inconspicuous foundation establishment stage master, this woman's means were not as weak as her strength level.
Boom.
An iron leaf blocked the brain-eating insect's sneak attack at the last moment. The strength of the iron leaf was so strong that it actually forced the insect back. One leaf like a mountain. However, the opponent's attack was too strong, and Duanmuyu was also sent flying. Even so, she did not forget to take care of Lin Yi behind her. She forcibly flipped her body over before she fell into the pile of mud. Lin Yi was on top of her and she was on the bottom. She fell face first into the mud, and her face was covered in mud. Why bother? Lin Yi was slightly touched. In fact, there was no need for Duanmuyu to do this. He could jump away before he landed, but that would more or less damage his essence soul. Pooh! Duanmuyu spat out a mouthful of mud, which was poured into her nose. She spat it out without caring about her image and said casually, It's okay. It's just a mouthful of mud. It's not a big deal. You really are a tough woman. Lin Yi said sincerely. Manly woman? What do you mean? Duanmuyu frowned. Miss is really a strong woman. Lin Yi changed the way he put it. Duanmuyu laughed when she heard this and did not take it to heart. Instead, She frowned and guarded against the brain-eating bug, which was dead but not dead. The mountain-like leaf just now was her strongest performance, but she did not expect that she still could not defeat a brain-eating bug that was on the verge of death. The gap between them was really shocking. Not only that, the most troublesome thing was that the brain-eating insect had completely turned into a loach at this moment. It quietly drilled into the thick mud, and even divine sense could not detect it. Silt could restrain the perception of divine sense to a great extent. Lin Yi had already experienced this when he was on Sky State Island. Back then, he relied on this to avoid being locked on by Shishan Old Master's divine sense. Even if the two types of silt could not be compared, the effect was similar. Moreover, Duan Muyu's level of divine sense wasn't that strong. It was normal for him to not be able to find the brain-eating bug. If Lin Yi was not so weak now, with his powerful divine sense, he might be able to lock on to the brain-eating insect. Unfortunately, this was a completely false proposition. He could only stabilize his essence soul by relying on the holy water pearl. Forcibly releasing his divine sense to search for the brain-eating insect was tantamount to self-harm, or even courting death. Let's go. Lin Yi sighed. At this time, the river was filling up bit by bit, and it was almost above his calves. The ominous feeling in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. His intuition told him that if he did not quickly return to the shore, he was afraid that something big would really happen.
But
Duanmu Yu also knew that things were not good. Now, she did not know where the brain-eating insect was hiding, but one thing was certain. If she continued to collect the divine sense grass, the other party would definitely attack again. She had just used 2 falling leaves in the autumn and 1 mountain-like leaf in succession, which consumed a lot of her chi. She might not be able to withstand another attack. Withdrawing and retreating was the wisest thing to do. However, the divine sense grass was right in front of her. Giving it up would be a waste of God's gift, and it might become a lifelong regret. Where there's life, there's hope. This divine sense grass is growing here, and it won't run away. When I recover, I'll come back again. I just need to wait for 1 more day. Lin Yi comforted her. These words were a bit self-deceiving. The divine sense grass did grow here, and of course, it could not run away. But was the brain-eating insect not interested in it? Maybe after they left, it would directly swallow it in 1 bite? Okay. Duanmu Yu finally defeated her impulse with reason. After making up her mind, she carried Lin Yi on her back and retreated to the shore without hesitation. The two of them thought that the brain-eating worm would jump out to stop them, but there was no movement from the mud pile. They did not know if it had escaped or was still hiding in the mud and watching. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a figure on the distant shore quickly approached the two of them. After seeing the other party's appearance, Duanmu Yu and Lin Yi's hearts thumped at the same time. The person who came was Xue Jianfeng. No one thought that they would actually meet this guy at this time and place. Oh, hey, the two of you got together so quickly. Aren't you afraid of offending public decency in broad daylight? The two of you are really open, really romantic. Xue Jianfeng looked at Lin Yi and Duanmu Yu with a mocking look. You better watch your mouth. Duanmu Yu suddenly glared. Although she was a tough woman, it did not mean that she did not value a woman's reputation. If she allowed Xue Jianfeng to talk nonsense, she and Lin Yi would not be able to clear their names even if they jumped into the Yellow River. Chapter 50-298. What do you know? Duanmu Yu was completely furious. If it were not for the other party's gold core stage strength and the fact that she was carrying a weak Lin Yi on her back, she would have already slapped him. Okay, then I'll take it that I don't understand. But I really don't understand. Are you a tomboy? Too hungry and thirsty? You actually squeezed the martial granduncle of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island into this state. Are you going to die of ejaculation? That's great. As the saying goes, dying under a peony flower is also romantic. Although you, a tomboy, are not a peony flower, you still have some beauty. It's a blessing to die on a woman's belly. I can't be envious. Xue Jianfeng made sarcastic remarks unscrupulously, completely forgetting that his life was just saved by Lin Yi a few days ago. His despicable nature was completely revealed. Duanmu was furious, but she was interrupted by Lin Yi. He glanced at Xue Jianfeng and said faintly, "What are you doing here?" Needless to say, of course, it's for the divine knowledge grass. Xue Jianfeng laughed loudly, his eyes staring straight at the divine knowledge grass that had been submerged by a little river not far away. "You know about the divine knowledge grass?" Duanmu was surprised. "Of course I know. Otherwise, why do you think I took the trouble to come here? If I can't find the divine knowledge grass, this once-in-a-lifetime ancient trial is just a fart," Xue Jianfeng said proudly. Although there were very few people in the small ancient world who knew about the divine knowledge grass, his father was after all the deputy sect leader of the Snow Sword sect. He was also one of the big shots in the public, so it was not surprising that he knew some secrets. "So you have been hiding on the shore and watching since just now?" Lin Yi suddenly said in a deep voice. "Yes. All of you are so fierce. How would I dare to come up rashly?" Xue Jianfeng laughed. In fact, he did not know that Lin Yi and Duanmu were here at first, nor did he know that the two of them had found the spiritual consciousness grass. He was purely attracted by the brain-eating insect passing by in the sky. After that, he saw the confrontation between Lin Yi and the brain-eating insect from beginning to end, and did not miss a single detail. To be honest, Xue Jianfeng was really shocked by the fierce strength of the two just now. He could not help but rejoice that he did not show himself rashly. Otherwise, even if he was an expert in the great perfection of the gold core realm, whether it was the brain-eating bug or the dragon Lin Yi, he would only be one-sidedly trampled. That would be terrible. Fortunately, he was wise enough to choose to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Moreover, God was also taking care of him in the dark. He actually created a result where both sides were defeated, allowing him to reap the benefits. Now, the brain-eating insect had been beaten half to death, and Lin Yi also looked like he was about to die. As for the remaining Duanmu, Xue Jianfeng did not put him in his eyes at all. He was an expert in the great perfection of the gold core realm. It was fine if he was afraid of a freak like Lin Yi, but could it be that he could not even deal with a trivial Duanmu? So, the spiritual consciousness grass is now in your pocket. Lin Yi's tone at the moment did not have the slightest emotion, and there was no hint of sadness or regret. It was completely an objective statement of fact. Duanmu was very unwilling, but what Lin Yi said was right. This time, Xue Jianfeng picked up a big bargain, and the spiritual consciousness grass would really be missed by him. At this point, he had no choice but to bow his head. "You let me win. You let me win." Xue Jianfeng cupped his hands insincerely. Seeing that the two of them were sensible enough not to stop him, he laughed proudly and walked towards the spiritual consciousness grass. With this thing, he could become the strongest golden core realm master. At that time, even existences like Lin Yi and the brain-eating insect could only tremble in fear under his feet. Just thinking about that scene was very beautiful. Unexpectedly, just as he leaned over to pick the spiritual consciousness grass, the brain-eating insect, which was no different from a loach, actually came out of the mud again, wrapped in the mud, menacingly.
"Oh,
Is this guy the guardian spirit beast of the spiritual consciousness grass?" Xue Jianfeng could not help but feel a little surprised. Normally, a spirit beast that was injured to this extent would have already escaped without a trace. Even if it stayed, it would at most ambush strong crossbow archers like Lin Yi and Duanmu. He was a dignified golden core realm master. Where did it get such courage? Although he was surprised, Xue Jianfeng's reaction was not slow at all. From the beginning to the end, he did not take it lightly at all. He had already noticed the brain-eating insect's action the first time, and before the other party could hit him, he had already struck first. Sword falls ninth heaven.
puff."
Blood splattered everywhere, and the brain-eating insect, which was already a mess, was seriously injured again. With its super strong body, if it was at its peak, Sword Fall's ninth heaven might not be able to break its defense. Unfortunately, at this moment, its degree of weakness was not much better than Lin Yi's. Immediately, Half of its body was cut off by Shui Jianfeng, and it fell into the mud without any movement. Hee, it's so weak and it still dares to come out to die. A beast will always be a beast. Brainless. Shui Jianfeng was very satisfied with his results. He turned his head and saw that Duan Muyu was about to return to the shore with Lin Yi on his back. He suddenly felt a little regretful that no one appreciated such an awe-inspiring scene. Looking at the spiritual consciousness grass that was submerged in the water was already over his waist. If he did not pick it now, it would be troublesome. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly went up to cut it off from the root, and then picked up the spiritual consciousness grass. However, in the process of bending down to pick up the spiritual consciousness grass, his whole body was inevitably immersed in the water. This time it was not good. Shui Jianfeng's expression changed greatly, and with a strange cry, he rushed out of the water with all his strength. He did not hesitate to use traceless snow steps, desperately escaping to the shore. Traceless snow steps was not only a movement martial skill that doubled the speed, but it also had a miraculous effect on this kind of water surface. Every step was supported by ice and snow, so he would not sink into the water, and his speed was very fast. What's the situation? Duan Muyu was shocked. Before she could react to what was going on, Shui Jianfeng, who was far behind her, and Lin Yi had already rushed to the front. Run, Lin Yi hurriedly urged. At this time, the most shocking thing was not Shui Jianfeng's strange reaction, but the state of the entire spiritual consciousness river. For the past 2 days, the speed of the rising tide was similar to the speed of the ebbing tide, and there was nothing particularly abnormal. But now, the rising tide was like the yellow river bursting its banks, and it could not be stopped, forcibly rolling up a huge wave. Once they were swept up by the huge wave, the consequences would be unimaginable. The situation was critical, so Duan Muyu immediately increased her speed to the limit. The monstrous wave was extremely fast, but fortunately, the two were not far from the shore. As long as they could escape to the shore in time, they should be able to escape this disaster. Chapter 53:37. You want me to prove it myself? Lin Yi smiled at the word. It sounded reasonable. If he couldn't prove his identity with solid evidence, then the other party would be right in front of him. It's totally unwarranted. Isn't the parallel art of green cloud evidence? Grandmaster, aren't the mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills you just gave them evidence? Those are the ironclad evidence. What's the point of flipping through a few old registers? Everyone knows that the disciple register and the sect records are incomplete. How can that be considered evidence? Xian Ijia said angrily. Killing the donkey after it's no use. Nothing is incomprehensible. Lin Yi's face was nonchalant. He'd expected this day to come, and he didn't feel any anger towards it. His mentality was basically the same as being bitten by an ant. If he was really unhappy, he'd just reach out and crush it to death. Why would he get angry over it? Of course, there was not such a big gap in strength. However, in terms of body level, people like Qin Dongcheng were really just an ant in his eyes. Grandmaster, he's not joking. He's coming with people soon. You'd better think of a way. Seeing Lin Yi's expression, Xian Ijia became anxious. I'll wait for him to come. I'm trapped here and can't get out. What's the point of thinking? Lin Yi was very optimistic. Xian Ijia was speechless. He felt that he had bet on the wrong person. Although the situation was indeed difficult to deal with, he should at least think of a way to deal with it. What's the point of throwing caution to the wind? Xian Ijia stamped his feet anxiously. However, Lin Yi was like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Xian Ijia had no choice but to leave in a hurry. Calculating the time, Qin Dongcheng would be coming with people soon. If they saw him snitching on Lin Yi, the first one to die would not be Lin Yi, but Xian Ijia. Not long after, a group of people arrived at the back cliff in a grandiose manner. The person in the lead was naturally Qin Dongcheng. Behind him, in addition to a group of gold core stage elders, there was also a group of black-clothed disciples in special clothing. They were the experts of the law enforcement hall. Lin Yi, the investigation team, has confirmed that you are not the Archean martial uncle of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Tell me, what is your ulterior motive for sneaking into the Green Cloud sect of the North Island by pretending to be the martial uncle? Chen Dongqing said aggressively. He couldn't help but look at Lingshan and Ziyu a couple more times as he said that. He'd been waiting for this day for a long time. Hearing this, Lin Yi looked at him calmly and said faintly, "Since you said it can't be told, then what else can I say?" "So, you admit that you pretended to be martial granduncle?" Chen Dongqing sneered. "Haha, why would I admit it? Isn't this all up to you, Vice Head Chen? You're the one who initiated the investigation, and the people involved are all your people. From start to finish, it's all up to you. So, as long as you're happy," Lin Yi said with a smile that wasn't a smile. Chen Dongqing paused. Lin Yi's reaction was far beyond his expectations. Even Lingshan and the others beside Lin Yi didn't seem worried at all, just watching the show. Watching the show? Did these people think this was a joke? As a Jianghu scammer, it's rare to be able to stay calm after being exposed, even if it's just on the surface. Chen Dongqing smiled confidently and didn't waste any more time. He ordered, "Enforcers, listen up. Take down this Jianghu scammer who pretends to be our martial granduncle. If he resists, kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, a group of law enforcers immediately surrounded Lin Yi's group. The Golden Core stage elders who came with Chen Dongqing also each guarded a position. Because of the one-step to heaven matrix, they did not have to worry about Lin Yi escaping. However, in order to avoid unnecessary casualties, they would also join forces, if necessary. A battle was about to break out. Xianijia, who was following behind, had his heart in his throat. There was nothing he could do in this situation. Not to mention helping Lin Yi, he didn't even dare to stand up and say a word. All he could do was to watch the scene unfold before his eyes. "Are you sure you want to arrest me?" Lin Yi didn't even look at the crowd. He just stared at Chen Dongqing calmly. "Of course." Chen Dongqing looked at him as if he was looking at a dead man. This time, not only were the masters of the law enforcement hall here, but also more than half of the Gold Core masters were gathered. Unless Lin Yi was a nascent soul old monster, he wouldn't be able to survive. "Okay, then let's start cleaning up the sect." Lin Yi nodded.
Oh?
"So you've accepted your fate?" Chen Dongqing was a little surprised. He thought that Lin Yi would put up a last-ditch struggle, but he didn't expect him to accept his fate so easily. "Accept my fate?" Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. He said meaningfully, "It's not appropriate to use this word on me, because the person who needs to be cleaned up is not me." With that, an invisible giant hand suddenly appeared on top of Chen Dongqing's head. Without giving him any chance to react, his whole spirit was instantly grabbed and then locked into the space of the jade pendant. The whole process took less than half a second. The crowd didn't even realize what happened. They saw Chen Dongqing suddenly collapse to the ground, motionless, as if his soul had been taken away. "Leader Chen! Leader Chen!" A few elders in the Gold Core stage who were close to him quickly surrounded him. However, no matter how they shouted, it was futile. Chen Dongqing had lost his spirit, and his body had become a vegetable. This time, everyone was scared silly, including the elders in the Gold Core stage. All of them hurriedly stepped back. Each of them looked at Lin Yi in horror. They didn't know what method Lin Yi used just now, but one thing was certain. Chen Dongqing's appearance was definitely the work of Lin Yi. Originally, in their minds, Lin Yi, the Grand Uncle Master, didn't have much weight. After all, on the surface, he was just a master in the great perfection of the Foundation establishment stage. Who would have thought that such a master in the great perfection of the Foundation establishment stage could actually easily defeat Chen Dongqing? Although the strength of Chen Dongqing, the deputy head, was far from outstanding, he was still a master in the middle stage of the Gold Elixir realm. Looking at the inner sect, there were only a handful of people who could really beat him. Apart from the Taishang elder Qinjiu, even the strongest master in the Gold Elixir realm, Hong Zijuan, head Hong, could not possibly defeat Chen Dongqing so easily. Lin Yi's move simply subverted everyone's understanding. Does anyone else want to try? Lin Yi smiled and slowly glanced at the crowd. Everyone who was swept by him was desperately retreating, for fear that they would accidentally follow in Chen Dongqing's footsteps. Chapter 53-38. Many of them were under Chen Dongqing's command. No matter how strong Lin Yi was, they would fight with Lin Yi without hesitation if Chen Dongqing gave the order. However, the problem was that they didn't even know if their leader, Chen Dongqing, was dead or alive. How could they fight without a leader? Especially Lin Yi's soul-hooking hand. It was something they had never heard or seen before. Humans were always afraid of the unknown. Even the masters of Gold Core Stage were no exception. At this time, Enchanting, who was also shocked, was the first to react. He cleared his throat and said, "Everyone listen to me. You've all seen the original version of the Green Cloud Calming Secrets. I believe I don't have to say whether it's true or not. Not long ago, Deputy Head Chen took the other original version of the mental cultivation methods and martial art skills from Martial Granduncle. If I'm not mistaken, he should have taken them to Highest Elder. If it's true or not, I believe he would have announced it in public, but he didn't mention it now. What does this mean?" The crowd couldn't help but be silent. In fact, they didn't need Enchanting to say it. They all knew whether it was true or not. However, they had to follow Chen Dongqing. The fact is very clear. If the Martial Granduncle who gave us so many original mental cultivation methods and martial art skills is still a fake, I think there's nothing in this world that's real. Enchanting said in a low voice. He needed a lot of courage to say these words in public. Because once Chen Dongqing woke up, or the news spread to Highest Elder, he would definitely not end well. However, Lin Yi's miraculous performance gave him enough confidence. He, Enchanting, had always been a cautious person, but when it was time to bet, he would have the courage to put everything on the line. His words made everyone speechless. It was not that they didn't dare to refute, but they really didn't dare to refute in front of Lin Yi. Chen Dongqing was their example. It was too risky. Everyone disperse. Enchanting said at last. Everyone looked at each other and finally carried Chen Dongqing away silently. In terms of strength and status, Enchanting was far from being the one with the highest authority. However, he was the one who had the most right to speak at this moment. After all, he had chosen the right side. After coming out of Ascending Cliff, several Gold Core Stage seniors of the Qin family looked at each other and carried Chen Dongqing to the top of the mountain without saying a word. No one knew the details of Lin Yi. Now, the only one who could end the situation was Highest Elder. When the crowd carried Chen Dongqing to the top of the mountain, Chen Jiu was still in the house, studying the mental cultivation methods and martial art skills that he had just written. He was in high spirits at this moment. He found that it was just as he had expected. Although the two could not directly improve in a level in a short time, it could greatly improve his understanding of mental cultivation methods and martial art skills. Had Lin could. Was highest, Yi had Qingyi. Sensing that there was movement outside, Chen Jiu did not raise his head. He frowned and said, "I have said that you can handle the things below by yourself. You don't have to report everything to me." The crowd could not help but look at each other. They had actually broken the rules by coming up without Highest Elder's permission. It was just that the current situation was special, so they had to do so. At this time, after listening to Chen Jiu's words, they suddenly felt a little awkward. Were they leaving or not leaving? Just when everyone was hesitating, Chen Jiu finally realized something was wrong. A figure immediately flashed out of the house. The next moment, it appeared in front of Chen Dongqing, whose life or death was unknown. After giving Chen Dongqing a careful examination, Chen Jiu suddenly turned pale with fright. He was a dignified nascent soul stage old monster, but he could not see what happened to Chen Dongqing. He could only vaguely sense that Chen Dongqing seemed to have no primordial spirit. However, how could a good person not have a primordial spirit? What the hell is going on? Tell me word by word. Don't leave out a word. Chen Jiu's face was extremely ugly. He could guess that this must be the work of Lin Yi, but before this, He had never thought that Lin Yi actually had such a means. After listening to the description of these gold core stage senior executives, Chen Jiu's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He said a lot of useless nonsense. These people didn't know what happened to Chen Dongqing at all. Because it happened so suddenly, they couldn't even accurately perceive the appearance of the soul-hooking hand. There was only one sentence to sum it up. Chen Dongqing was glanced at by Lin Yi, and then he lay down. A gold core stage expert was just glanced at by someone and became this half-dead state. You actually dare to say this kind of nonsense? If that Lin Yi is so terrible and so heaven-defying, will he be trapped by a mere one-step-to-heaven array? Chen Jiu was infuriated. These people were trying to push the blame onto Lin Yi, making him a god. What a bunch of trash. Supreme Elder, please calm down. The gold core stage senior executives quickly knelt down, one by one, as if they were walking on thin ice. Humph. Although he was angry, Chen Jiu did not lose his composure. Although the description of everyone was a mess, at least one thing could be summed up. The means used by Lin Yi had exceeded the understanding of these gold core stage masters. In other words, the other party was not simply a primordial spirit of the Foundation establishment great perfection. He had really underestimated him before. After Chen Jiu calmed down, he looked at the unconscious Chen Dongqing on the ground and could not help but fall into deep thought. As a Yuanying realm old monster who stood at the top of the small Jianghu in primitive times, Chen Jiu was a first-class existence in terms of strength and vision. However, in the face of the current situation, he was helpless. He did not even know what kind of evil means Chen Dongqing was in. How could he save him? If it was someone else, a vegetable was a vegetable, and Chen Jiu would not care about it at all. But Chen Dongqing was different. He was the successor of the Qin family of the North Island that he had painstakingly cultivated. The talent had already withered. If Chen Dongqing was involved, the future of the Qin family of the North Island would be really worrying. Tell me, what should we do about this? Chen Jiu glanced at the senior executives of the gold core stage who were kneeling on the ground. As soon as these words came out, everyone could not help but look at each other, and they suddenly became more and more shocked. Did this mean that even the Supreme Elder could not save Chen Dongqing? In my humble opinion, the one who started the trouble should untie it. A middle-aged man with a jade-like face said carefully. This person's name was Lu Pingon, and his strength was at the late stage of Gold Core. Among the senior executives of the Gold Core stage, he was Chen Dongqing's most powerful helper. In addition, Lu Pingon had another special identity. He was Chen Jiu's pro-disciple. If not, he would not dare to speak in front of Chen Jiu. Go on. Chen Jiu glanced at Lu Pingon and said faintly. Yes. Lu Pingon hesitated and said what he thought. Chapter 53-39. I think that no matter what kind of powerful existence Lin Yi is, since he is known as the Taigu Uncle Master of Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, he will never dare to fall out with us easily. Otherwise, no matter whether his identity is true or false, he will become the mortal enemy of our sect. I believe he knows this very well. Lu Pingon's words were not self-deception. After all, after the disappearance of the chief Hong Zijuan, the Qin family faction had now become the core force of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Once they fell out with the Qin family faction, it was equivalent to starting a war with the entire Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, and no one could afford the consequences. Isn't this already falling out? Chen Jiu glanced at him. Yes, but it's not completely falling out. Although Deputy Chief Chen's state is very worrying, he is not dead after all, isn't he? Lu Pingon's tone was respectful. You mean that he left himself some leeway? Chen Jiu nodded slightly. He was a little overwhelmed by anger just now. Now that he calmed down and thought about it carefully, it really made sense. Since Lin Yi had the means to make Chen Dongqing half-dead, it would be easier for him to kill Chen Dongqing if he wanted to. However, he did not do so, and the meaning was self-evident. Yes, if I'm not wrong, he did this to pass a message to you, Master. Lu Pingon said. What message? Chen Jiu asked. He wants to talk to you. Lu Pingon said respectfully. He didn't understand the specific situation just now, but now that he came back to his senses, he had already seen it clearly. Obviously, Lin Yi was using Chen Dongcheng as bait to force Chen Jiao, the Taishang elder, to show up in person. If it went well, Chen Dongcheng should still be saved. If it didn't go well, then Chen Dongcheng naturally couldn't be saved. Interesting. Then do you think I should talk to him? Chen Jiao looked at Lu Pingon meaningfully. Lu Pingon hesitated, and then said firmly, "In my opinion, we shouldn't talk." "Don't talk? Then Dongcheng can't be saved?" Chen Jiao's gaze suddenly became sharp, almost piercing Lu Pingon's mind. He was suspecting the other party's intentions. It was true that Lu Pingon was one of his few pro-disciples, but in his mind, Lu Pingon was far from being comparable to Chen Dongcheng. Even pro-disciples were just outsiders, while Chen Dongcheng carried almost all the hopes of the Qin family in the North Island. How could they compare? With Chen Dongcheng around, disciples like Lu Pingon, no matter how strong and outstanding they were destined to only be supporting characters. However, if Chen Dongcheng died, it would be a completely different story for them. There was no second Chen Dongcheng in the Qin family of the North Island. Disheartened, Chen Jiao was likely to find a qualified successor among his disciples, and the most promising one was Lu Pingon. In the immemorial underworld, the concept of a clan was greater than that of a master and a disciple. This was different from the Heaven Stage Island, and it was similar to the concept of the secular world. "Master, please calm down. Disciples' sincerity towards you and Vice Head Chen can be seen by the heavens and earth. It's just that considering the big picture, you really can't do it yourself. That would only let Lin Yi succeed." Lu Pingon said quickly. Chen Jiao was silent for a moment, squinting at Lu Pingon. In order to show that he had no disloyalty, Lu Pingon could only bite the bullet and choose to look at him. Even if his back was sweating profusely, he did not dare to look away. Finally, Chen Jiao's gaze softened. "Stand up and talk." "Yes." Lu Pingon finally breathed a sigh of relief, and other high-level gold core cultivators who came up together also stood up. However, they were all glared at by Chen Jiao, who sent them away with a single word.
"Tell me what you think,"
Chen Jiao said lightly. "In this disciple's opinion, once you show up in person, there will be no room for negotiation. If you and Lin Yi don't come to an agreement and fall out in front of each other, the first to suffer will be Deputy Head Chen. If you don't fall out with him in person, then the news will inevitably spread, making people think that you have personally confirmed his identity as the immemorial Uncle Master. At that time, if you want to reverse the case and deal with him, there will be no justification." Lu Pingon analyzed. "But if I don't show up, isn't it Dongcheng who will suffer?" Chen Jiao frowned. "In any case, he must protect Chen Dongcheng. So, this disciple's opinion is that we can talk to him, but Master can't show up in person. We should send another person to talk to him, so that no matter what the result is, there is still room for advance and retreat. It is not too late to make a decision after testing the other party's attitude," Lu Pingon suggested. Chen Jiao pondered for a moment and finally decided. "Well, then I will send you to talk to him and find a way to find out his bottom line. Remember, no matter what, you can't hurt Dongcheng's life." "Yes, Master." Lu Pingon was overjoyed. He was willing to take the risk to suggest this so that he could get this chance. No matter what the result was, as long as he performed well, he would be able to occupy a more important position in Chen Jiao's heart. If Chen Dongcheng really couldn't be saved in the end, then Lu Pingon's chance would come. Chen Jiao sighed softly as he watched Lu Pingon leave. He looked at the unconscious Chen Dongcheng on the ground. Too bad, he's an outsider. They arrived at the sky-reaching cliff. Xia and Ijia had already been sent out by Lin Yi to gather people's support. There was only him, Ling Shan, and the others in the formation. Ziyu's eyes went wide when she saw Lu Pingon's figure. "Lin Yi bro, you really are a genius. What kind of divine foresight is this? As long as the Grand Elder isn't an idiot, he'll probably send someone to talk to me. The only difference is who. Alright, you guys go back to practicing. Don't bother with this bullshit." Lin Yi waved them off with a smile. Disciple Lu Pingon greets Grand Elder. Lu Pingon bowed solemnly. Oh, so you guys admit that I'm the Grand Elder now? Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. You must be joking, Grand Elder. Whether or not your identity is real isn't confirmed yet, but from your disciple's standpoint, as long as there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that you're real, I will treat you as the real Grand Elder. I won't dare disrespect you at all, Lu Pingon said. Haha, you sure know how to talk. Lin Yi sized him up. What business do you have with me? I'm here for Vice Head Chen, Lu Pingon said carefully. Chapter 5340. Deputy Sect Leader Chen acted impulsively and offended Martial Granduncle. This matter has been known by Grand Elder. Grand Elder is extremely angry and has decided to punish Deputy Sect Leader Chen personally. However, now Sect Leader Hong has not returned, and the affairs of the sect are complicated and cannot be left without someone in charge. I hope Martial Granduncle can be magnanimous and let Deputy Sect Leader Chen go for the sake of the sect, and let him apologize to you personally. What do you think? While speaking, Lu Pingon carefully stared at every expression of Lin Yi, for fear of missing any useful information. This is Grand Elder's idea? Lin Yi squinted at him and said, Yes. Lu Pingon nodded. If it was his own idea, he believed that the other party would not bother to talk with him at all, because it was meaningless. As a result, Lin Yi's reaction surprised him. Since it is his idea, why doesn't he come to talk with me himself? Lu Pingon was choked speechless for a while. This guy did not play his cards according to reason. Normally, at this point, he should be very clear that he was just a mouthpiece. Wasn't it good to leave some leeway for both sides? Did he have to meet the king as soon as he came up? If he really met the king as soon as he came up, Lin Yi might not necessarily get any benefits. What if Grand Elder fell out with him on the spot? Martial Granduncle, in this disciple's opinion, you shouldn't be in a hurry to meet with the Grand Elder. Before the two of you reach a certain tacit understanding, it's more appropriate for this disciple to run errands for you, right? Lu Pingon composed himself and said seriously. If the two sides wanted to sit down and talk, they at least had to confirm that both sides had the intention to negotiate first. Otherwise, when they met, they would directly flip the table. Then there would be no negotiation. Lin Yi glanced at him, a smile that wasn't quite a smile on his face. So what you're saying is, I'll talk to you first and you'll tell the Grand Elder the conditions, and then he'll decide if he wants to accept it or not, and then you come here to talk terms with me. Lu Pingon opened his mouth, wanting to correct his words, but nodded in the end. That was what he meant. Correcting the words would only make it sound better, but it wouldn't change the essence of the situation at all. He'd already thought it through, too. It didn't matter how beautiful his words were when dealing with people like Lin Yi. Lin Yi didn't play by the rules at all. Aren't you guys misunderstanding something? Lin Yi said with a smile.
What?
Lu Pingon was stunned. In the current situation, I'm not asking you for help, but you're asking me for help, aren't you? Lin Yi grinned leisurely. Lu Pingon frowned and said in a deep voice, Indeed, Deputy Sect Leader Chen's state is very worrying. Grand Supreme Elder hopes that Martial Granduncle can be magnanimous and let Deputy Sect Leader Chen go. But then again, from Martial Granduncle's point of view, I'm afraid it's better not to let anything happen to Deputy Sect Leader Chen, right? Haha, from my point of view, it's just cleaning up the sect. You think too much, Lin Yi said indifferently. If it weren't for the mission that Qinzhou had given him, Lu Pingon really wouldn't want to waste his breath here. This guy didn't have the slightest awareness or sincerity to negotiate. He was completely stubborn. What the hell could he possibly achieve from this? Do you really want to fall out with the entire Green Cloud sect of the North Island? Lu Pingon was forced to make it clear. This kind of words should not appear in a negotiation. When it appeared, it was basically not far from the collapse of the negotiation.
Guess.
Lin Yi's answer was so irresponsible that it made people vomit blood. Lu Pingon was about to go crazy, but he could only bite the bullet and say, I guess you won't, because it's not good for you and the secular disciples who came with you. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for them, shouldn't you? Could it be that the Grand Elder is already planning to target them? Lin Yi, on the other hand, was surprised. He said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "The Grand Elder is a nascent soul master after all. I didn't expect you to have such a unique way of doing things." Saying it was unique was actually despicable and shameless. Lu Pingon couldn't help but choke. Even if it was really Chenjio's intention, he couldn't be the one to take the blame. He quickly said, "Don't get me wrong. Grand Elder doesn't mean this, and so do we. We just have to consider everything carefully, don't we? Since you don't mean this, then what are you talking about?" I was alarmed for a false alarm. "I thought Grand Elder was going to attack them," Lin Yi said angrily. Lu Pingon really wanted to slap his face with a false alarm. The words had been very clear, and it was obvious that it was so. There was really no one who could pretend not to understand it. Couldn't they negotiate happily? "What are you still doing here? Hurry up and convey my meaning to Grand Elder," Lin Yi urged. Lu Pingon was dumbfounded again. They hadn't talked about anything yet. From the perspective of negotiation, it was not even a warm-up. How could it end? "Speaking of which, what exactly did you mean?" "I don't have time to waste with you. Next time, remember clearly if you really want to talk, let Grand Elder do it himself. Otherwise, I won't receive you," Lin Yi said straightforwardly. At this point, even if Lu Pingon was thick-skinned, he couldn't stay any longer. He could only leave embarrassedly. Back at the top of the mountain, after listening to Lu Pingon's dejected report, Chenjio's gloomy face suddenly became even uglier. "This old man asked you to go to test Lin Yi's bottom line and attitude. What did you find out?" "This disciple is ashamed." Lu Pingon's face was full of shame and anger. In fact, he couldn't be blamed for not doing his job well. It was really Lin Yi's way of doing things was too wild. From the beginning to the end, there was an unsettling pattern. What should he do? Then tell me yourself. What should we do next? Do you really want this old man to do it personally? Chenjio snorted coldly. That definitely won't work. Until the last step, Master. You can't easily go out. Otherwise, you will really be led by the nose by him. Lu Pingon shook his head and said in a low voice, "Although this disciple is dejected this time, thinking about it carefully, it can't be said that I didn't gain anything. At least, I can be sure that he doesn't really want to shed all pretense of cordiality with us. Otherwise, when this disciple asked him directly, he wouldn't have avoided answering. This has long been expected." Chenjio frowned, thinking that it was impossible for Lin Yi to fall out with them even if he wanted to. If he did, then he would stay at Ascending Heaven Cliff for the rest of his life. Chapter 53-41. Yes, there's another point. Although Lin Yi doesn't want to talk to me directly, it doesn't mean that he has to force you to talk to him in person. After all, it's not only us who need leeway. It's the same for him. Lu Pingon analyzed. Then, Chenjio signaled him to continue. "I think that Lin Yi must have a request, and he definitely wants to talk to us, but he doesn't want to talk to me like this. First, he thinks it's too passive, and second, he thinks it's too embarrassing. Maybe he's looking for a mouthpiece to talk to," Lu Pingon said. "Who?" Chenjio asked. Xianijia. He was the only one who could talk to Lin Yi and win Lin Yi's trust among all the high-level gold core cultivators in Green Cloud Sect in the North Island. "Okay, then you go to him." Chenjio's eyes flashed with a hint of fierceness. After this incident, it was obvious that Xianijia would be a dead man. When Lu Pingon came to him, Xianijia was still trying to win over other high-level gold core cultivators. He knew that it was a critical period for him to win the hearts and minds of the people. One more supporter meant one more momentum and one more chance of winning. Xianijia's blood turned cold when he saw Lu Pingon, Chenjio's direct disciple. His first thought was that the matter was exposed, and Highest Elder was going to punish him. When he understood what Lu Pingon meant, he couldn't help but be stunned. Judging from Lu Pingon's words, Highest Elder was going to negotiate with Lin Yi on an equal footing, and Lu Pingon and himself were the representatives of the two parties. Xianijia certainly didn't dare to agree to this kind of thing without permission. After understanding Lu Pingan's meaning, he quickly ran to Sky Cliff to ask Lin Yi. Since they want to talk, let's talk. We won't lose anything anyway, Lin Yi agreed casually. Then how do we talk? Xi and Ijia said weakly. Can't you wrangle? Lin Yi glanced at him. Wrangle? Xi and Ijia stared blankly and said, Grand Master, we should have a goal in our negotiation. Is wrangling with each other our goal? That's right. Wrangling is our goal. He can talk however he wants. All you have to do is one thing. Don't object or agree. In short, it's wrangling. Once you've wrangled yourself until you faint, you'll have succeeded, Lin Yi said. Why? Xi and Ijia did not understand what Lin Yi meant at the moment. Since it was just wrangling for the sake of wrangling, what was the point? There are two reasons. First, it is Chen Dongcheng who is half dead, not our people, so they should be the ones who are anxious. We have no reason to be anxious at all. When it comes to negotiations, it has always been the one who is anxious who suffers. Just wait and see. After wrangling for a long time, they will definitely lose their cool. That will be our chance. Lin Yi advised. Yes. Xi and Ijia nodded and asked, What about the second one? The second is you, Lin Yi said, looking at him. Me? Xi and Ijia was puzzled. Let me ask you, have you had any success in winning people's hearts these days? Lin Yi asked. Very little. Xi and Ijia was embarrassed. It was not that he did not work hard, but his strength and status were too ordinary. Usually, no one paid attention to him among the Gold Core stage higher-ups. At this critical moment, he did not have much appeal at all. Even if they were dissatisfied with the Qin family's faction, they would only laugh and say that he was overestimating himself after listening to his suggestion. Very few of them took it seriously. It was actually better now. Due to the deterrence brought by Lin Yi's display of power, the other Gold Core stage higher-ups no longer looked down on Xi and Ijia like before. After all, in their eyes, even if Lin Yi was not comparable to the highest elder, a nascent soul stage old monster, he was definitely not someone that they, the Gold Core stage experts, could compete with. However, it was unrealistic to say that he could be easily won over. So, this negotiation is an opportunity to increase our influence, Lin Yi pointed out. Xi and Ijia finally understood when he heard this. He patted his head and said, I understand now. Granduncle, you mean that this negotiation should not only be delayed, but it should be delayed to the point that everyone knows about it. In this way, we can form a concept in the sect that you and the highest elder are equal in status. As your negotiation representative, I can also increase my status and influence. Yes, but there's another meaning. Everyone knows that the Green Cloud sect in the North Island is divided into the local faction and the Qin family faction. Now, the highest elder of both parties is the representative of the Qin family faction. So, who do you think is the representative of the local faction? Lin Yi said with a smile. Of course, it's you, Granduncle. Xi and Ijia's eyes lit up. The reason why he couldn't rope in the senior management and disciples of the Gold Core stage of other local factions was that they didn't believe that he could shoulder the burden of the local faction. Now Lin Yi stood out and made a rallying call. Not only did he easily get rid of Chen Dongcheng, but he also forced the highest elder to sit down and negotiate patiently. This was something that even Hong Zijuan, the head of the sect, couldn't do. In this way, once the idea of being an equal was deeply rooted in people's hearts, it was impossible for Lin Yi not to be the leader of the local faction. Because all the senior management and disciples of the Gold Core stage of the local faction would gather spontaneously. Once the momentum was formed, it would be unstoppable. So, why don't you go and wrangle with him? Lin Yi shrugged. Understood. Xi and Ijia immediately went with confidence. What happened next was just as Lin Yi expected. Although Xi and Ijia usually looked honest and sincere, his brain was actually very active. He was able to argue with Lu Pingan with great eloquence and was not at a disadvantage at all. Lu Pingan almost went crazy. He thought he could relax a little without facing Lin Yi directly, but he didn't expect such a guy to come. At first glance, He looked like an ordinary pot of warm water, but after a long time of contact, he knew that this guy could never be boiled. He was no less difficult to deal with than Lin Yi. In the end, there was only one word. There was no way out. But he couldn't turn against him openly. After all, in this negotiation alone, they were the passive and weak party. Moreover, it was not that the other party didn't cooperate. Instead, it should be said that they were very cooperative. They just kept talking and wasting time. The other party was determined to fight a protracted war. What could he do? If it weren't for Qin Dongcheng, Qin Jiao would have turned against him long ago. But now, he could only grit his teeth and suppress his anger, instructing Lu Ping'an to continue to grind with Xianijia. But as time went on, Lin Yi's image and status in the Green Cloud sect of the North Island really changed. Chapter 53-42. Initially, Lin Yi, the primordial Grand Elder who popped out of nowhere, was just a topic of discussion at most. Now, he was the second most important person after Grand Elder Qinjiao. People's hearts were always so subtle. An outsider like Lin Yi, logically speaking, should not be associated with a local faction. But now, he was about to become the flag-bearer of the local faction. How could anyone explain this? Of course, Xianijia could be said to have played a huge role in this process. Not only did he drag Lu Ping'an back and forth, but he was also vigorously promoting Lin Yi's position and drawing the local faction's higher-ups and disciples to their side. Otherwise, these people might not have gathered so quickly. Someone had to add fuel to the fire from behind. On the other hand, Lin Yi did not care about the messy things happening in the outside world. Other than guiding Lingshan and the others in their training, the only thing he did every day was to train himself. He relied on the spirit grassroot to enhance his primordial spirit and strengthen the soul-hooking hand. These two were his top priorities at the moment. On the other hand, Lung Lung, who had returned to the Snow Sword School, ran into trouble. Lung Lung was placed under house arrest. That's right. As one of the disciples with the most outstanding performance in the secular world and the primordial trials, Lung Lung was placed under house arrest on the second day she returned to the Snow Sword School. The reason was that she did not follow the sect's orders during the training period. According to the father and son, Xue Liping and Xue Jianfeng, they did everything possible to determine that Lung Lung's previous behavior was a betrayal of the sect. If that was the case, it would not be as simple as house arrest. She would be sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts in public. However, the higher-ups of the Elder Council, including the sect master Hong Qingyuan, were not idiots. They could see Lung Lung's huge potential even with their toes. They would not do something like destroying their own pillar of support. Of course, other than Lung Lung's huge potential, the other two people's efforts could not go unnoticed. One was her master, Su Xiaodong, and the other was Bing Wuqing. If one were to say that Su Xiaodong was the lowest-ranked elder candidate and had no right to speak, then Bing Wuqing, who had stood up alongside him, was someone that no one could ignore. After all, after going around the secular world and the primeval trials, this young elder candidate was now an expert with gold core perfection. In the entire Snow Sword School, other than the Great Elder, who was the only nascent soul old monster, the strongest was the golden core perfection. Before this, there was only one golden core perfection expert, and that was the sect leader, Hong Qingyuan. And now, the Snow Sword faction suddenly had two more golden core perfection experts. One was Bing Wuqing, the other was Xue Jianfeng, and the other was Lung Lung, who was at Foundation Establishment Perfection. When Hong Qingyuan and the rest saw these people for the first time, they really felt like they had been smashed by a pie. A mere training in the secular world had actually brought back a bunch of pillars. This was not just a blessing in disguise, but a raging fire that was about to burn them to ashes. However, for Hong Qingyuan and the other top executives who had the right to speak in the sect, the sudden emergence of two experts in the peak of the gold core realm was a real trouble. There was a very real problem. If a newcomer appeared, what would the old people do? The immemorial martial world had always been a very realistic world, where one's strength determined one's status. Those with golden core great perfection were already existences that stood above tens of thousands of people in the Snow Sword faction, so their status naturally could not be careless. Even if they could not directly make Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng the same rank as the sect leader, they should at least be above the others, right? Otherwise, it would not match their strength. However, even if Vice Sect Master Xue Liping agreed, would the other 5 elders, including Qi Qianqiu, agree? Speaking of which, Xue Liping had always been restless as the Vice Sect Master. It was only because he was at loggerheads with great elder Qi Qianqiu that Hong Qingyuan, as the sect master, had been able to control the situation. Now that there was suddenly his son, Xue Jianfeng, who was above tens of thousands of people, joining hands, how could he control the situation? Fortunately, there was still Bing Wuqing. Hong Qingyuan was a little worried that Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng were on the same side. He did not expect them to fight as soon as they came back, and the cause was Lung Lung. Xue Jianfeng tried every possible way to kill Lung Lung, but Bing Wuqing, who had never had any relationship with Lung Lung, stood out for the first time. Her attitude was very tough, and anyone who dared to touch Lung Lung had to be prepared to face her wrath. Although it was strange, Hong Qingyuan and the others were obviously happy to see it happen. Not only could they protect Lung Lung, a seedling with great potential, but more importantly, they had an excellent candidate to keep Xue Jianfeng in check. In the past, there was great elder Qi Qianqiu to keep Vice Sect Master Xue Liping in check. Although there were 2 more Golden Core perfection experts now, they also kept each other in check, making it convenient for Hong Qingyuan to continue controlling the situation. In contrast, when Xue Jianfeng heard Bing Wuqing's dance, he was stunned on the spot. During the primeval trials, Bing Wuqing had helped Lung Lung out of trouble, which had already puzzled him. Now, she had actually gone from bad to worse, and was willing to shed all pretense of cordiality for Lung Lung. This was completely beyond his expectations. This was almost equivalent to openly standing on Lin Yi's side. What the hell was Bing Wuqing up to? In the end, in the face of Bing Wuqing's unreasonable and tough stance, and in the face of Hong Qingyuan and Qi Qianqiu's cooperation, Xue Jianfeng and his father Xue Liping could only choose to give in. After a long time of wrangling, they finally came up with a result that was neither painful nor itchy: house arrest. This time, Lung Lung was prepared to go into closed-door training. After she had stabilized her realm, she would start preparing to break through to Golden Core. The so-called house arrest could be said to be neither painful nor itchy to her, and was basically equivalent to no punishment. After the meeting, Xue Jianfeng deliberately blocked Bing Wuqing's way. There was a problem that he had to clarify. "Get out of my way." Bing Wuqing walked away expressionlessly. "Wait." Xue Jianfeng forcibly blocked her way. After the other higher-ups of the sect had all left, he lowered his voice and said, "What the hell are you doing? Do I need to explain to you?" Bing Wuqing glanced at him. "Of course. Don't forget that we're on the same side. It's fine if you don't help me, but you've been shielding Lung Lung over and over again. Have you ever thought about the consequences of this?" Xue Jianfeng said angrily. "What consequences could there be?" Bing Wuqing looked indifferent. Xue Jianfeng was about to explode from anger. He said angrily, "Shielding Lung Lung is equivalent to shielding Lin Yi. You're betraying the core."
Oh?
"But why did I hear that the higher-ups told us not to provoke Lin Yi? In comparison, it's more appropriate to put the label of betrayal on you. At least I didn't do something as petty as trapping and killing Lin Yi. Am I right?" Bing Wuqing retorted. Chapter 53-43. Xue Jianfeng was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He was full of bitterness at the mention of this matter. In order to seal Bing Wuqing's mouth, he was forced to share half of the consciousness grass with her. In the end, before he could even get out of the primordial trial grounds, before he could even warm up the remaining half of the consciousness grass, and before he could even feel the magical effects of the consciousness refinement, it was snatched away by Lin Yi unreasonably. As a result, the consciousness grass that he had painstakingly obtained ended up in Bing Wuqing's hands, while he himself had nothing. Just thinking about it made him so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. "Is there anything else?" Bing Wuching glanced at him and said lightly, "If there's nothing else, please move aside. I'm going back to cultivate in seclusion. The consciousness grass can't be kept for too long, or its effects will be reduced." Shui Jianfeng felt a sweetness in his throat. This time he was so angry that he really wanted to vomit blood. Bing Wuching left leisurely, and Shui Jianfeng could only grit his teeth. She was obviously trying to anger him. What could he do? "Humph. Don't let me find any evidence of your betrayal, or you'll be the first to suffer." Shui Jianfeng secretly gritted his teeth. He now felt that there was something fishy about Bing Wuching. If the first time she sheltered Lung Lung in the primordial trial grounds was a little abnormal, then the signs of this abnormality were becoming more and more obvious. He was almost certain that Bing Wuching and Lin Yi had some kind of unspeakable relationship, but he lacked evidence for the time being. Without decisive evidence, even if Shui Jianfeng suspected, he wouldn't dare to report to the bespectacled doctor. Otherwise, if Bing Wuching made a false accusation and revealed the fact that he killed Lin Yi, he would be in even more trouble. After the meeting, Lung Lung was very cooperative and took the initiative to accept house arrest. Of course, in reality, she was cultivating in seclusion. In addition, Bing Wuching saw that Lung Lung's punishment had been settled, and she had completed the task that Lin Yi had given her, so she couldn't wait to cultivate in seclusion. After all, for him, not only did he want to use the half of the divine knowledge grass to refine his divine sense and become the strongest gold core stage master in the legends, but he also had a more important purpose. Don't forget, Lin Yi gave him a condensed nascent golden pill. What Bing Wuching didn't expect was that Shui Jianfeng's quietness was just a facade. After less than half a month, Shui Jianfeng had reverted to his old ways. But this time, he didn't attack Cold Lung directly, but had other intentions. The 15th of every month was the regular meeting day for all the gold core cultivators of the Snow Sword School. All the big and small matters of the school would be discussed and dealt with on this day. Apart from this, unless it was a special situation, the Elders' Conference would not be specially convened. As usual, Sect Master Hong Qingyuan took the main seat, but the two seats beside him were in dispute. The previous meeting was a welcoming ceremony, and those who attended were not only Bing Wuching and Shui Jianfeng, but also Cold Lung, who had achieved foundation-building Great Circle, and special seats were specially arranged for them. This was understandable, but now that it was a regular meeting, everyone's seat was very particular. Everyone knew that the closer one's seat was to Sect Master Hong Qingyuan, the higher their position was. Therefore, it had always been Vice Sect Master Shui Liping and Qi Qianqiu, with the 5 great elders sitting on the left and right. To put it bluntly, Shui Liping on the left and Qi Qianqiu on the right. This was the usual rule. But now, it couldn't be done. If it was still the same as before, then where would Bing Wuching and Shui Jianfeng sit? Taking a step back, Bing Wuching was in seclusion now, so there was no need to consider it for the time being. But Shui Jianfeng was still here. As expected, the moment Sect Master Hong Qingyuan sat down, Shui Jianfeng sat on his right. At the same time, his father, Shui Liping, sat on Hong Qingyuan's left. The father and son had directly occupied the 2 most prominent seats. Seeing this, the faces of the 5 great elders, including Qi Qianqiu, darkened. Usually, the 5 of them were not completely of one mind, but at this time, they were definitely on the same side. After all, if they really let Shui Jianfeng and his father cook the rice, it would not only be Great Elder Qi Qianqiu's position that would be affected, but the other 4 great elders would also suffer. This was something they absolutely could not tolerate. Shui Jianfeng, what is the meaning of this? Qi Qianqiu frowned and said in a low voice. He did not sit, and neither did the other 4 great elders. As for the remaining ordinary gold core cultivators, they did not dare to sit. The entire meeting hall was filled with a group of people. Other than Sect Master Hong Qingyuan, only Shui Jianfeng and his father were seated. Oh, nothing, it's just a meeting. Don't just stand there, Great Elder Qi, quickly sit. Shui Jianfeng pretended to be polite and pulled out the chair beside him, indicating for Qi Qianqiu to take a seat. You're sitting in the wrong seat, Qi Qianqiu said bluntly. Is that so? Shui Jianfeng looked to his left and right and said with a puzzled expression, I don't think so. Doesn't our Snow Sword faction always arrange the ranking according to our strength? Aside from sect leader Hong, I seem to be the only expert in Golden Core realm here. I'm still young, so don't lie to me, Great Elder Qi. Qi Qianqiu and the others were speechless for a long time, but they could not refute him. Let alone the Snow Sword faction, even in the entire immemorial Jianghu, strength reigned supreme. There was no doubt about this. However, the problem was that this was not a primitive society. The phrase, strength reigns supreme, was reflected in all aspects and methods, and would never be shouted out loud. Otherwise, how would they be different from barbarians who did not know any etiquette? So, what if you're in Gold Core Paragon? Who told you that Gold Core Paragon can definitely sit in the second seat of the Elders Association? Shui Jianfeng, don't be too arrogant. The second elder snorted angrily. Oh, then I'll have to humbly ask for guidance. If having the strength of Gold Core Paragon is not enough, then how can I sit in this position? Shui Jianfeng raised his eyebrows. If you want to sit in this position, of course you have to have the corresponding status. The other elders said in unison. That's easy. For a young and strong Gold Core Paragon like me, it's only reasonable that I should be entrusted with heavy responsibilities, right? Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of talent? Shui Jianfeng shamelessly chuckled. Everyone's eyes twitched when they heard this. Although it was reasonable, coming from Shui Jianfeng's own mouth, it was really shameless to a certain level. This guy's skin was simply as thick as a city wall. Then how can we not waste talent? Qi Qianqiu asked without batting an eyelid. Chapter 53-44. Of course we have to arrange a position that matches my Golden Core perfection strength. Sect leader Hong, what kind of position do you think we should arrange for me? Shui Jianfeng turned his head to look at Hong Qingyuan. All of a sudden, everyone's focus shifted to Sect Master Hong Qingyuan, who had been silent all this while. At this time, he was still habitually tapping his finger on the table. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, This is not a small problem. We need to discuss it properly. Everyone looked at each other speechlessly. He spoke as if he was serious, but it was the same as not saying anything. This couldn't be blamed on Hong Qingyuan. From his point of view, there was no other way. After all, no matter what, a new generation expert like Shui Jianfeng had to shoulder a heavy responsibility. If he couldn't make the best use of the Golden Core perfection experts that other sects yearned for, then it would be a dereliction of his duty as the sect leader. But out of consideration for controlling the overall situation, Hong Qingyuan couldn't possibly let Shui Jianfeng, this rising star, overtake the host. Otherwise, with Shui Jianfeng and his father Shui Liping's character, things would definitely get out of hand in the future, and that would be a huge problem. Sect leader Hong means that this is today's important topic? Qi Qianqiu and the others looked at each other. That's right. Everyone sit down first. There's no need to rush over the position. Let's all express our opinions and discuss it to a conclusion. I think there's no need to fight over it anymore. What does everyone think? Hong Qingyuan suggested.
Okay.
Qi Qianqiu didn't argue and led the elders to their seats. Then, who will speak first? Hong Qingyuan's eyes swept across the crowd. Only he, the sect leader, had the final say in this kind of matter. However, the more it was so, the more he couldn't reveal his opinion. Only by remaining calm and letting everyone express their opinions would he be able to grasp the most initiative. Qi Qianqiu and the others looked at each other and remained silent. Because they didn't inform each other beforehand, they didn't dare to speak before they understood the pros and cons. Then I'll say a few words first. Shui Liping smiled, then said, As the saying goes, don't avoid relatives. Although Foam, is my son, he's already a Golden Core perfection expert. I think we should arrange a corresponding important position for him. Otherwise, if word gets out, it will be hard to convince the masses. We might even be laughed at by outsiders. That's not appropriate. Vice Sect Master Shui, why don't you clarify what kind of important position you think we should give him? Qi Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he asked. As an expert second only to the Grand Elder, I feel that he should at least be the second in command. I didn't say that he would be the sect leader. After all, he's still young and inexperienced. He won't be able to control the overall situation for the time being, Shui Liping pointed out. These words caused Hong Qingyuan's eyelids to twitch. His expression remained unchanged, but he couldn't help but want a curse in his heart. If he can't control the situation now, does that mean he wants to control the situation in the future? It turned out that this pair of father and son didn't want to be the second in command at all, but were plotting for his position as the sect leader. When Qi Qianqiu and the others heard this, although they frowned, they were secretly laughing in their hearts. This pair of father and son were really too arrogant. Weren't they clearly pushing Hong Qingyuan to their side? Second position? Taking it literally, the position below the sect leader is naturally the vice sect leader. Does vice sect leader Shui intend to abdicate and give it to his son? The third elder grinned. Then I have no objections. Although there's no such thing as a son inheriting the father's position in our Snow Sword School, your family situation is special. With such a good son, I feel that it's barely feasible to have him replace you as the vice sect leader. The fifth elder expressed his opinion. Seconded. The fourth elder nodded. I agree as well. The second elder nodded as well. Since everyone has the same opinion, then I have no objections. Qi Qianqiu nodded as well. With the current situation, it was already unrealistic to not let Shui Jianfeng take the position. Since that was the case, he might as well let him replace his father Shui Liping. In any case, he was already used to fighting with a vice sect leader. It didn't matter even if the father was replaced by the son. Haha, everyone seems to have misunderstood. As the vice sect leader, I've always been conscientious and conscientious. Even if I don't have any merits, I've still put in hard work. Besides, I've never said that I want to abdicate, right? Shui Liping sneered. Also, let me add something. My father, as the vice sect leader, doesn't seem to be the number 2 figure. Grand Elder Qi, haven't you always boasted that you're superior to my father? From what you're saying, you're eyeing my Grand Elder position? Qi Qianqiu couldn't help but laugh. Shui Jianfeng, although you're young, you've still grown up in the sect. Don't you know how the Grand Elder position came about? It's not self-bestowed. The Grand Elder is the same as the sect leader. It's a public election by the Elders' Council. At the same time, it has to be personally acknowledged by the Grand Elder. Do you think you can become the Grand Elder just because you wanna? The second elder snorted disdainfully. That's right. Other than strength, the Grand Elder's most important is his contributions to the sect and his deep qualifications. Which of these two do you think you're qualified for? The other elders echoed.
E.
Shui Jianfeng was stunned. Shui Jianfeng was stunned when he heard that. Although those words were unpleasant to the ears, he really had no way of refuting them. Aside from his strength as a gold core great perfection cultivator, he had nothing else. There was no need to talk about his qualifications, and if one were to talk about his contributions to the sect, Qi Qianqiu was a brother who had risked his life for the previous sect master, who was also the current great elder. Back then, he had even contributed so much to the sect that no one in the entire Snow Sword sect could compare to him. Everyone, you've misunderstood. I've never thought of becoming the Grand Elder, Shui Jianfeng could only say. Then what exactly do you want to do? Everyone looked at each other. Vice sect leader, but add 2 words in front of it. Managing, Shui Jianfeng said directly. Managing vice sect leader? Everyone was stunned. Then, their expressions changed. Qi Qianqiu, the Grand Elder, could rely on his qualifications to slightly suppress the vice sect leader. They were basically on equal footing. However, the managing vice sect leader, as the name suggested, was clearly above the vice sect leader. Naturally, it would be above the Grand Elder as well. That was the true number 2 figure in the Elders' Council. In other words, you're going to have a managing vice sect leader out of nowhere? Qi Qianqiu looked at the calm Hong Qingyuan and said, Sect leader Hong, do you think there's a need for that? That's right. Is there a need for that? Hong Qingyuan did not answer him directly. Instead, he went with the flow and looked at Shui Jianfeng. Chapter 53:45. Of course there is. As the name suggests, the managing deputy sect master has to share the burden of the sect master. Think about it. Sect master Hong not only has to take care of the sect's affairs, but you also have to serve the supreme elder at the same time. If there is any big matter in the Jianghu, you have to personally deal with the other clans and sections. There are too many things, and the burden is too heavy. Therefore, it is very necessary to have a managing deputy sect master. What does sect master Hong think? Everyone looked at Hong Qingyuan. At this point, it wouldn't be right if he, as the sect master, didn't express his opinion.
Tap, tap, tap.
Hong Qingyuan tapped on the table again and again. After whetting everyone's appetite, he suddenly grinned. Since that's the case, then let's have a deputy sect master. I'll have to rely on you in the future. What? Qi Qianxiu and the others were shocked. It was obvious that the deputy sect master wanted to split the sect master's authority. Compared to them, the elders, Hong Qingyuan, the sect master, would suffer the most. They thought that Hong Qingyuan would refute the deputy sect master's words, but who would have thought that he would agree so easily? What was going on? Xue Jianfeng and his father Xue Liping were also surprised. The two of them had even prepared a set of words to deal with the other party's refusal, but they didn't expect Hong Qingyuan to be so tactful and agree without saying anything. Then many thanks to sect master Hong. Xue Jianfeng nodded slightly, already assuming the posture of the deputy sect master. When he looked at Qi Qianxiu and the others again, his gaze was filled with a sense of superiority. This newly promoted second in command of the Elders Association was very quick to get into character. Sect Master Hong, this is no small matter. Shouldn't it be better to report it to the Supreme Elder? Qi Qianxiu said with a frown. He didn't know what Hong Qingyuan was thinking, but this matter was clearly not a good thing for him and the other elders. With his deep friendship with the Supreme Elder, he believed that the Supreme Elder wouldn't allow Xue Jianfeng to crawl on the necks of the other elders for no reason. About that, Hong Qingyuan pointed at the table and said ambiguously, "The deputy sect master's matter is indeed very important, but the Supreme Elder has been in seclusion recently. I don't dare to disturb him. What do the others think? I don't think that's necessary. According to the tradition of our Snow Sword School, only the sect master and the Great Elder need to be confirmed by the Great Elder. Everything else can be decided by our Elders Association. If we have to bother the Great Elder for every little thing, what's the point of having us?" Xue Liping was the first to step forward to object. "I don't think it's necessary. That's what I'm thinking as well. The Great Elder's seclusion concerns the future of our entire Snow Sword School. How can I disturb him for a small matter like mine? If anyone insists on going, I suggest that they personally go find the Great Elder and see what the outcome is," Xue Jianfeng said to Qi Qianxiu and the other elders with ill intentions. Everyone fell silent. They could only look at Hong Qingyuan. Communicating with the Supreme Elder was a privilege only the sect master had. Unless there was a special situation, others couldn't skip ranks to report it. Not to mention, disturbing the Supreme Elder's seclusion was a matter of great importance. Most people didn't have the courage to do so. Hong Qingyuan pondered for a moment, then finally made his decision. How about this? Logically speaking, this matter does indeed need to be reported to the Supreme Elder, but it's not important enough to be reported to him alone. So, I'll report it when I pay a visit to the Supreme Elder next time. Before that, the Deputy Sect Master's matter is decided. Sect Master is wise. Xue Jianfeng and Xue Liping looked at each other and smiled. Qi Qianxiu and the others could only shake their heads helplessly. Since Hong Qingyuan had already made his decision, it was futile no matter how much they objected. After all, the Sect Master had the final say. Moreover, Xue Jianfeng and Xue Liping also had the right to speak. So, they could only resign themselves to fate.
All right.
Since the Sect Master thinks so highly of me, I, Xue Jianfeng, will not pass on this responsibility. As the saying goes, a new official must make 3 changes. As the Deputy Sect Master, this is the first time I'm officially participating in the Elders' Council. I can't disappoint everyone. Xue Jianfeng paused for a moment. Then, his gaze fell on a woman sitting in the last row. It was Cold's master, Su Xiaodong. Being stared at like that, Su Xiaodong's heart skipped a beat. The last time Xue Jianfeng launched an attack, it was Bing Wuqing who stopped it. Now that Bing Wuqing was still in closed-door training, Xue Jianfeng had now become the deputy sect master, who was second only to one. If he were to launch an attack in front of everyone again, what could she use to fight against him? As expected, Xue Jianfeng's next sentence was aimed at Cold again. As the deputy sect master, my first topic is to discuss Cold's matter with everyone again. Cold, what else is there? The last meeting has already reached a conclusion. Don't tell me you want to overturn it? Su Xiaodong quickly objected. What's your position? Do you have the right to speak now? Xue Jianfeng glanced at her disdainfully. Su Xiaodong was so angry that her face turned red. She could not say a word for a long time. Indeed, in terms of their positions, she was only a candidate elder, while the other party was the dignified deputy sect master. They were not on the same level at all. At this moment, Hong Qingyuan came to the rescue and said, "It's all right. Speak freely. However, Cold's matter has already been settled. There's really no need to continue to keep a close eye on it." He had already taken a big step back by approving the appointment of the deputy sect master. If he were to continue to tolerate and make concessions on Cold's matter, he would be lacking a bottom line. In the eyes of others like Qi Qianqiu, they might think that he had secretly reached a tacit agreement with Xue Jianfeng and Xue Liping. That would cause dissension and dissension. That was not a situation he wanted to see. Deputy Sect Master, it's true that a new official has to make changes. However, aren't you being too persistent by repeatedly setting fire to the same place? The third elder sneered. The rest of Qi Qianqiu and the others also had a playful look on their faces. Everyone, you've misunderstood. Although I'm still talking about Cold, I'm not talking about her disobeying orders during her training. I'm talking about another serious crime of hers, leaking the sect's mantra to outsiders. Xue Jianfeng said with certainty. What? As soon as these words came out, everyone, including Su Xiaodong, was shocked. Disobeying the sect's orders could be a light or a serious crime. A simple confinement would be enough. However, if it was really, as Xue Jianfeng said, that Cold had leaked the sect's mantra to outsiders, then the crime would be really serious. This was practically an act of betrayal. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.